Call this meeting of the Oceanside City Council to order and start with a roll call, please.
Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Feller.
Here.
Councilmember Kime. Here. Councilmember Sanchez.
Here.
Rodriguez.
He's in closed session.
In closed session.
Right there.
He's here.
If you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Mullen? Yep.
Session, so therefore there's no closed session report.
That will go to our consent calendar, which are items 3 through 9. Do we have any speakers?
No speakers.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on the consent calendar. Please vote.
Are we still?
Oh,
We'll go to our first general item, item 10, which is ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the Oceanside City Code, replacing the Administrative Service Department. Mr. O'Brien?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and members of the City Council. Robert O'Brien, Human Resources Director. The item before you this evening is an introduction of the ordinance to amend Chapter 2, Article 4 and 10 of the Oceanside City Code. In the early 1970s, Chapter 2 of the Oceanside City Code established the Department of Finance Services for the uniform processing and development of all fiscal, accounting, and budgeting functions. In January of 1998, the City Code was updated to change the word finance to administrative services throughout Chapter 2. This change reflected the establishment of the Administrative Services Department, which was not only tasked with overseeing the fiscal functions of the city, but personnel, risk management, and information technologies as well. This administrative structure was utilized for only a few years and effectively dissolved in the early 2000s. Today, the Financial Services Department, under the direction of the Financial Services Director, oversees all fiscal, accounting, and budgeting functions for the city. Meanwhile, the Human Resources Department is tasked with directing and overseeing all personnel benefit administration functions, as well as risk management and, more recently, information technologies. With that understanding, it is necessary to update the City Code to reflect existing practice, delete all references to the personnel, employee benefits, information systems, and risk management functions, and to change administrative services to financial services throughout Chapter 2, Articles 4 and 10. The proposed ordinance will accomplish this update. Therefore, staff recommends the City Council introduce the ordinance amending Chapter 2, Articles 4 and 10 of the Oceanside City Code. Thank you for your time and attention, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Do we have any speakers?
no speakers.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Move approval. Or excuse me, introduce the ordinance.
This is the introduction of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Oceanside amending Chapter 2, Articles 4 and 10 of the City Code by striking outdated references to the Administrative Services Department and Director.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
We'll go to item 11, which is authorization for staff to move forward with the development of a higher local pilot program. And we'll start with Michelle.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. I'm Michelle Geller, the Economic Development Manager, and tonight I'm presenting a higher local pilot program for your consideration. Whoops. Scott? Oh, there we are. First, the synopsis. It is recommended that City Council authorize staff to move forward with developing a higher local pilot program and authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with Miracosta College Technical Career Institute to partner with the city on this effort. Now, some background. In March of last year, City Council approved a business attraction and retention financial incentive program. And this was an initiative brought forward by Councilmember Rodriguez and Councilmember Kime to create more jobs for Oceanside residents. Staff got to work researching this type of program and looked at best practices in other cities. You will see an example of an effective program of this type attached to the staff report called Hire Moval out of Moreno Valley. Staff also conducted a survey of Oceanside employers, the results of which are also attached to the staff report, and they held a business roundtable at the Gilead Conference Center that included local employers and service providers. It was at that roundtable that a partnership with Miracosta College Technical Career Institute was proposed. And in June, staff presented a Hire Local pilot program framework to the Economic Development Commission and received positive feedback. And this past fall, staff had multiple discussions with Miracosta College TCI to sort of flesh out additional pilot program details, which will be discussed next. And Linda Kurakawa from Miracosta, she's the Director of Community Education and Workforce Development. She would be here tonight. I think we didn't realize that things were going to go so quickly. So she really served as an advisor to staff on ways to structure this pilot program so it had the greatest chance of success. The pilot program being proposed would be 18 to 24 months in length. This would provide enough time for multiple groups of graduates to complete the programs offered. The pilot program would pay fees and tuition on a reimbursable basis for Oceanside residents who successfully complete one of 8 programs, and these programs were specifically chosen for their potential to result in well-paying careers. The pilot program would also provide a $500 employee retention incentive to Oceanside residents hired by Oceanside companies who remain in good standing with their employer for 6 months. Now, the program's success is going to hinge on a very targeted marketing strategy. Currently, 30% of Miracosta College TCI's program participants are Oceanside residents, and they have over 24 Oceanside employers already working with them. So we're really just going to need to increase the number of students in the pipeline who are Oceanside residents and increase the number of Oceanside companies who are hiring those students. So circling back, authorize staff to move forward with the development of a Hire Local pilot program, and authorize city manager to execute an agreement with Miracosta TCI. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any public?
No speakers.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Thank you very much. I'm really excited to move forward on this program. I know staff has worked hard in partnering with the business community, and really, you know, the goal behind this whole effort was how can we create higher paying jobs locally? Is it to incentivize the employer? Is it to create educational bridges? And what the employers came back with is it's more valuable for them to have a qualified and able Oceanside employee than it is to receive a tax incentive. And so that kind of birthed moving this to the next phase. And so again, I'm really excited that we can offer this to Oceanside residents in the form of a pilot program. Then we can come back, fine tune it, make it better, potentially partner with the business community to help fund this in the future and create a lot more higher paying jobs. Just to give you guys an example, the phlebotomy technician is only a 10-week program, and they can start paying right out the gate. They get started paying $27 to as high as $115 an hour right here in Oceanside. So, you know, programs like this are going to really help a lot of families, and I'm excited to move it forward. So I'd like to make a motion to approve it.
Deputy Mayor Feller.
Hi. Did you want to?
You could go. I'll make a quick comment when you're finished.
Yeah. Okay. I just I'll second it. One thing I would like to know is how are we going to measure this? How is it measured?
So we'll measure it based on, you know, number of graduates of these programs matched up with Oceanside companies. As I mentioned, 30% of the participants are currently Oceanside residents, so we'll look to increase that number, obviously. And then about 25 companies, Oceanside companies, are working with Miracosta to hire those graduates, so we'll work on upping that number as well. Because this is a pilot, I mean, we don't necessarily have a benchmark to measure it against, but you know, we'll just look to increasing those two numbers. And then after 6 months of the program, we'll evaluate it.
That was the rest of my question, so thank you.
Yeah, I think as the traditional four-year degree, as we're learning, it might not always be the best fit for everybody. You know, it's and with our student debt issue that we have, you know, over $1 trillion. I think the short technical certificates are a good way to get important skills and get somebody in the job market quickly. So I'm happy that the program went this direction. I think it hopefully will be a good return on investment, and we'll get some good qualified candidates. So thank you again for your work.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Thank you. And absolutely, I'm all for hiring local. We have had situations where developers have hired workers from Arizona and had them come here. And I really think we need to address those kind of issues where there are so many people who are wanting to work, and part of what we're doing is developing Oceanside and creating these jobs, and unfortunately some of these jobs, a significant part of these jobs, end up going to outsiders. So I think that we need to do more, and I'm looking forward to figuring out how we can do that. I also believe that we need to bring more jobs to Oceanside, more high-paying jobs, because we happen to have the lowest jobs to residents ratio in the entire county, and that speaks to our ability to whether or not we're going to be successful in ensuring the economic and environmental sustainability of our city over time. So bottom line is, I'm going to support this, and hopefully it's a good project. But really what we need is, this is just going to be a handful of jobs, and I understand it. You know, whatever was created is good, but what we need is really to get businesses to come to Oceanside and have the good paying jobs, and ensuring that the jobs that do come to Oceanside, that we hire locally. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Feller?
What was just said has nothing to do with this project. This project is very important, and Ryan brought up an interesting point that not everybody needs to go to college. And a good example of that is there are vocational scholarships for trade schools, and Maricosta has many of those, which is what we're aiming at. So as groups figure out this effort, they'll be able to scholarship some of these people to help them with their needs as well. I think it can open it up wide.
Councilman Rodriguez?
In reference to Councilmember Sanchez's comments, I really look forward to you bringing some action forward to back up your motives on what you would like to see for our city. So I look forward to seeing that in the near future.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
Thank you.
Go to item 16. How many do we have speakers?
Under item number 16, we
Officer?
don't have speakers, but on item number 17, we have 9 speakers.
9 speakers?
Yes.
So let's do 17, but before you call the first speaker, I just wanted to make a brief statement. At the last council meeting, I made a statement in regards to the signatures for the North River Farms Initiative. I need to clarify that I did not see the petition, nor did I personally verify whether my name appeared on that petition. After reviewing the city clerk's response, I need to apologize for the uninformed public statement that I had made.
Our first speaker is Joan Bachman, to be followed by Alejandro Sanchez, to be followed by Barbara Brown. And as I call your name, please make your way up to the podium. We have 2 podiums, and you will have 3 minutes to speak. The green light means go, the yellow light means you have 1 minute, and the red light means please wrap up your comments.
Okay. Okay, there it goes. Good evening, council members and mayor. A number of times I have spoken to you about trees at the harbor and how they've cut down all the wrong ones, and they've finally gotten down to the 2 last dead Tory pines that I got an administrative notice about. So the harbor has had a problem with trees, and a lot of it's been of their own making because they cut down the wrong ones again and again. And so the Buena Vista Audubon Board of Directors on Friday approved a motion to ask the City of Oceanside to create a landscape master plan for the harbor that addresses sense of place, bird habitat, and the inclusion of native plants. We have a lot of land at the harbor. Right now, it's pretty much full of invasive weedy grasses, and there are a number of torrey pines on the slopes, and then also pretty worthless palm trees that are not providing shade or habitat or anything else. So we would like to see a landscape plan for the harbor and have you direct staff to create that. We worry about parking, we worry about a lot of other things, but the landscape there is suffering and is very uninspired. There's no sense of place. It's weedy. So, and we would like to see canopy trees at the harbor that would also bring in tourists. That, as you know, bird watching is one of the biggest growing hobbies in America. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, City Council members, my name is Alejandro Sanchez. I have lived in the city here in Oceanside for not too long, though I have been around for the last 30 plus years, not only as an activist and advocate, getting very involved and passionate in a lot of issues, social issues mostly, and educational issues. And this time, I never seen the function and how some of you departments operates here in the city. And unfortunately, I had the very, very worst experience that I ever encountered in my whole life. I've been an advocate for so long, like I said. I've been in other cities and making a lot of complaints for many issues that I've seen that are very important for our cities. But your department here, the code enforcement, horrible, horrible, horrible. I mean, I never thought that these people have this mentality, I don't know, so arrogant and demanding things, and they don't even comply, in my opinion. When you have a citizen who come and address some issues, you have to come to the city councils and speak to them before they take any action. After 24 days, finally I had a code enforcement officer who came today to my house. Unfortunately, the idiot never called. He just showed up to my house. But I was so honored, and I'm repeating again, so honored that after I talked to three, actually leave my phone number and contact you here personally came. After I contact 3 city council members, only one respond to my help. Only one. And I really, tonight I would like to recognize our city council, Esther Sanchez, who had the time to meet with me and to see what's going on in the property where we live in with my family. I'm asking you to put more attention to this department, code enforcement. In my opinion, I've never seen code enforcement like this in other cities. And like I said, after 30 years and proudly representing the Hispanic community, not only have the credentials but the experience to tell you that this is bad and you need to fix these problems. Thank you very much.
Barbara Brown, to be followed by Kathleen Lippett, to be followed by Fabio Marchi, to be followed by Christine Farr.
I don't see a green light. I don't see a green light. Oh, here we go. I'm Barbara Brown, and I'm a resident of the Rancho Hermosa Senior Community. And this is my second time here due to the fact that the situation has grown terribly, I feel. And I fear for our residents of the Rancho Hermosa Senior Community because River Oaks Apartments is on San Ramon, which comes up San Ramon to Rancho del Oro. At San Ramon and San Dimas, there is a 4-way stop. The situation now has gone worse. The residents are not slowing down. They're barreling right through the 4-way stop. They're not even slowing down. They're just going right through. I've called the police department of Rancho Oceanside 3 times. I have not seen an officer there, and I have not received any callbacks. Now, I fear for our residents because a lot of them walk with walkers. I was a resident, I think it was a year ago, that I was in the crosswalk and I was almost hit. By the time the resident had stopped, his truck was about 12 inches from my body. And then he yelled at me and told me to get out of the walk. And I feel that we need to really look at this issue because of the fact that we are 100 units there. And I feel that I realize I've been watching the news and I realize there's a lot of more important issues that do come up. But even if in the past, they have actually sent an officer there like for one day, and that really helps. But like I said, they're just barreling right through that four-way stop now. And I mean, this one, when I called the sergeant of traffic control at the Oceanside Police Department, I called and told her, I said, this gentleman could have killed somebody. He was coming so fast up from the River Oaks Apartments across San Dimas. I said, he could actually have killed someone. And I really feel this issue needs to be looked at seriously. Thank you for letting me share. And I've been a resident of Oceanside since 2000, and I'm a taxpayer. I own a home, and I have great concern for our residents. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. My name is Kathleen Lippett. As a public health practitioner and on behalf of sound public health policy, I respectfully request the Council consider adopting a ban on flavored tobacco products, including vapes. The U.S. Surgeon General, CDC, National Institute on Drug Abuse, the American Journal of Preventive Medicine, and the FDA support banning flavored tobacco products. The San Diego County Board of Supervisors recently banned flavored vape products, citing the CDC's recent report of at least 55 deaths nationwide and 2,600 vaping-associated lung injury hospitalizations. 85% of these victims reported using THC vaping products. The companies making and selling these products are profiting from a product that is known to be dangerous, and 74% of youth report accessing these products from retail stores. Only 15% of youth reported online access. Hooking a new generation of tobacco users is a strategy essential to the industry to create lifelong customers. Nearly 80% of users between 12 and 17 began with a flavored product. Many said they didn't even know that the products contained nicotine and didn't think they were harmful. All nicotine products are addictive and increase the risk of developing serious health problems, especially when use begins during adolescence. Thank you very much for your consideration, and I have a handout for you.
Fabio Marchi, to be followed by Christine Farr, to be followed by Ruben Major, to be followed by Esther Sanchez.
Good evening, councilmen and women. My name is Fabio Marchi, 2030 Broadway. I got good news for you. My project is moving forward. We're very close to finish. And I was going to say another message today, but I hear what this gentleman talked to me before, and the city of Oceanside, it is a city that still play with archaic procedures. There is, believe it or not, discrimination in the city. Some high-rank employees, they are power tripping on people. I would like to give names, but then they get upset and they retaliate more on me and my project. And the reason that I'm here today is because I would like you to hear my point. Nobody here listen. we are in a critical time in our country. We're divided, and we are arguing for one silly piece of pipe that I installed in my project that seems to be wrong. And the excuse from the city attorney says, well, you should change it because the cost of your pocket will be cheaper than suing us. Well, you say something like that, John, don't shake your head. You are very, very a person that I said to you once in your face and in front of everybody, you are the mastermind behind here to block the process of this city, to be efficient, to be open-minded. And I know you're going to spend money in Miracosta College. That's a great motion, but I agree with Esther. We need to bring people that work in the city the opportunity to get jobs. And we need to stop wasting taxpayers' money and paying high-payer officials to do nothing, waste our time. And I don't want to be more stingy or specific, but we need to have a dialogue here. Elections are coming up, and we will see some changes. Nothing is forever in life. I will die one day. Everybody will. So why we are arguing for minutia? Why we put that ego in front of the good thing? See, we need to be more humble. That's it. I hope I can get in your hearts.
Christine Farr.
Hi there. Good evening, City Council members and Mayor. My name is Christine Farr, 3984 Sherborne Drive. On October 3rd, 2018, the Oceanside City Council adopted a resolution to declare a shelter crisis. Our share of the HEAP funds was over $200,000, and these funds went toward the purchase of a second hot van and the doubling of our hot team. On the Martin versus Boise decision, our goal is to provide enough shelters for the entire homeless population so we can legally remove the homeless encampments permanently out of the SNL riverbed and other public spaces as a health and safety issue. With the December announcement by Bread of Life that they were forced to shut down the only winter shelter in Oceanside, we have yet to build one temporary emergency shelter since declaring a shelter crisis. This has become a humanitarian crisis, which has left the homeless to suffer through a series of winter storms that pass through the area without any protection to shield them from the elements. I urge the City Council to take immediate action to alleviate the suffering of our homeless population. Plan. Alex Maitre, a retired Navy operational planner who also volunteers at Interfaith, has presented an ambitious plan with the first steps toward solving the homeless crisis is to begin building temporary emergency shelters. The Amicus Emergency Sleeping Cabin is at the heart of his strategy. Also known as tiny houses, these are tool shed size, bare-bones structures with a locking door and windows, no running water, no electricity. Toilets and showers are located on-site on trailers, only for overnight sleeping and storage of personal valuables during the day. The cabins can be built in one day and dismantled in hours and can be stored flat for any future use. No more than $4,000 each. The city should pay for the materials to build these cabins and the leasing of the toilets and showers on trailers on site and the leasing of the land itself. Best solution. It's time for the City Council members to make a decision to approve Alex Maitre's plan. The total for 15 to 16 micro-communities to build and operate from April 2020 to June 2021 is $1.36 million. So to set up one community, including showers and toilet trailers, is approximately $71,500 once. If you want to estimate how much it's going to cost to continue each month, it's approximately $18,000 times 16 every month. I sent an email to all the City Council members with the specifics. Thank you for your time. And I have two of these to enter into the record. Thank you.
Ruben Major, to be followed by Esther Sanchez, to be followed by Roger Davenport.
He's probably on his way. Honorable council, colleagues, staff, and members of the public, I'm Councilmember Esther Sanchez, OHS Class of 74, and I am running to be the next mayor of Oceanside, the city of my forefathers, a city that I love very much. My story is very similar to others of our diverse community. I grew up in poverty, although I never knew it, as I had the love of my parents, family, and extended family, as well as many friends from throughout North County. My folks always volunteered, helping to build the first rec center at Joe Balderrama Park, speaking out for lights and paving streets, working together to end the violence, bringing hope and opportunities to our youth and families. I earned a BA in Urban Studies from Brown University, JD from Hastings College of Law, and served as a deputy public defender in our community here for 20 years, always giving. Running for city council the same year as Councilmember Jack Feller was an extension of my commitment to public service. I've worked very hard to turn our community around, including creating community policing, working to lower our public safety response times and crime rates, and overall preserving and enhancing our quality of life through economic development in every neighborhood, regardless of socioeconomic status. We are still challenged with having the lowest jobs to residents ratio in the entire county. We need more jobs. Green, livable wage jobs within our city limits. We need to become sustainable economically and environmentally, and we need to more aggressively address our affordable housing and homeless issues. I've been meeting with our city staff, housing specialists, and volunteers, listening to our homeless, and gone on a ride-along with our homeless outreach team. And while I've worked with staff to push through over 1,300 new affordable housing units, we obviously need more. As one of our city's representatives on the North County City's Homeless Task Force, I've contributed to the discussions on how we are to shelter all our unsheltered, as well as how to address our mental health needs. We need bridge housing, also known as transitional housing, with supportive services. We need at least 2 day centers where our homeless can come in from the streets and receive referral services and life and job skills. And of course, we need additional affordable housing. I am committed to ending homelessness in Oceanside. I am committed to bringing good paying jobs to Oceanside. And I am committed to preserving our quality of life, preserving our city's character. Unfortunately, shortly after my no vote on the North River Farms project and the successful filing of the referendum against the council majority's action, I received a notice of a recall petition, this after having been reelected just a little over a year ago. My record speaks for itself. I understand the signature gathering should be starting up. I ask that you not sign it, that instead you contact me. Give me an opportunity to discuss whatever your concerns are. If it's about our city business, please call me here, 760-435-3057, or email esanchez@oceansideca.org. If it's about personal or campaign-related matters, please call me at 760-435-0971, or email me at yesforester@gmail.com. I believe in us. I believe that this year's election is about saving the very soul of our beloved city of our Oceanside. Let's continue to work together. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Roger Davenport, live at 541 Crouch Street. I also wanted to address the last city council meeting, and I wanted to thank our city clerk, because the day after our city council meeting, the city clerk reported the following. He said, at the end of last night's city council meeting, Mayor Peter Weiss made a comment on the record accusing the North River Farms referendum signature gatherers of forgery. And he goes on a little bit later to say, I received a written communication from an individual by the name of Peter Weiss, a realtor and resident of Oceanside, stating that he had indeed signed the petition. And Mr. Weiss gave him permission to release that. And then at the end of it, or near the end, he said, having confirmed that Peter Weiss signed the petition, I find no evidence of forgery with respect to Mayor Weiss's allegations at this time. And I added the formatting and emphasis there. So I want to personally thank our city clerk for his rapid and clear investigation into the malicious accusation that was leveled at the referendum signature gatherers. His unbiased response also illustrates the value of having an elected city clerk who has no ties, obligations, or potential conflicts of interest with our city council or other staff. So again, I say thanks to the city clerk, and I urge everyone to vote no on Measure K, which would take away our voice in electing the Oceanside City Clerk and City Treasurer. Thank you very much for your time.
There are no more speakers.
I have a little presentation. I didn't realize we were going to get started early. I'll make this as fast as possible, I promise. Go ahead. Okay, this program I've been working on for several months now, just exploring ideas on how we can improve housing affordability locally. And it's important that we understand the difference between affordable housing and housing affordability. Affordable housing is government subsidized housing funded by tax dollars to help low, very low income families. Housing affordability is where the low and medium income families of Oceanside, which is a large portion of our population, fall. So it's defined as a ratio of medium priced home compared to area medium housed incomes. In other words, an area is not considered affordable until 50% or more of the households can afford to purchase or rent 50% plus of an area housing stock, utilizing up to 43% of their gross income toward housing and obligated debts. And then this gives you an example of a breakdown of what would be considered affordable. And as you can see here in Oceanside, the affordability gap is pretty far. We have a long way to go. So as a policymaker, it's important that we work on addressing the housing affordability dynamic. And so this program, I think, will address that. Next slide. Go ahead and get the whole slide up. I just pushed one. So there's a few reasons. Push the button. Yep. Housing is unaffordable to most Californians. House prices are at their highest point ever in California history, especially on the coast where 75% of all Californians live. House prices have never been this high. 55.3% of California renters spend more than 30% of their total household income on housing. In California, we are 3.2 million housing units short compared to what we have. So when you look at it from a supply and demand level, there is a ton of demand, very low supply. And the rental vacancy ratios are at 3.5%, which is really low, which allows investors who manage rental properties to show that as an indicator to increase rent because there's more of a demand. It's a part of their investment portfolio decision making. Next slide. Oceanside Affordable Market Purchase Program. So this is a unique program. Go ahead and click it again, Mike. It is a hybrid down payment assistance program that leverages developer affordable housing in lieu fees instead of tax dollars to bridge the affordability gap on both new and existing market rate housing stock. These are some of the details. The city would, through the in lieu fund, would fund 20% of the acquisition price. Income limits are up to 115% AMI, which is area medium income. And there's some more details. I have a short video I'll show you, so I don't need to spend too much time on that. Go ahead, next slide. So here's a quick overview of the program just to give you a gist. finish this up. Go ahead. So let me explain the shared appreciation because there's some concerns with that. So the City of Oceanside has to mitigate default. So in any portfolio, investment portfolio, let's say there's $1 million, which will be able to help about 14 families. Let's say one of those loans goes into default or in foreclosure. They're required to qualify based on all conventional financing guidelines, full documentation. Well, that 25% appreciation is there to help mitigate for any of those losses. It will also help grow the fund, which in a sense is a pay it forward sort of dynamic. So that we can help more families in the future. So these funds will always be used for affordable housing, whether that's a government subsidized program or this program. You know, staff will be able to mitigate as they prepare this what the ratio would look like. But I give an example on the right. The net appreciation is not the same thing as just a portion of the equity. Net appreciation is the difference between the purchase price and the sale price less cost. So we're going to subtract the closing costs, we're going to subtract the down payment they put in of, let's say, $5,000, and then we have a net appreciation of $59,000. So the city would take $14,750 of that, and that would be a part of the share. The average home ownership right now for a first-time home buyer is just over 5 years. So these funds will help Oceanside residents achieve home ownership. Go to the next slide. Yep. So let me show you a side-by-side comparison of if somebody was to try to buy a house in today's market at $500,000. Right here, you're seeing the mortgage payment is going to be about $3,200 right now in today's market. If they were to go buy a house for $500,000 and have the 1% down, they have to have excellent credit for this type of program because of the low down payment. And with all those terms, their mortgage payment is $3,284, including everything, including mortgage insurance. If they use Oceanside AMP, their payment's only $2,440 for that same $500,000 house. Go ahead and go to the next slide, and that's a breakdown with all those assumptions. So they're saving $844 a month than if they were renting, or than if they bought it on their own with only 1% down. Fair market rent, according to HUD, for zip code 92056 is $3,210. So they're paying $770 less in a mortgage payment than they are in if they were just to be renting out in town. So the beautiful thing about home ownership, as we all know, is it's a forced savings account. You're building equity, you're creating wealth for your family, you have pride of ownership. We have a whole generation of Oceanside residents that have been pushed out of purchasing because the gap is so far. They're giving everything to rent and they're not able to save those down payments to achieve home ownership. Next slide. Done. So I'm done. If you guys want more comments.
We have one speaker on this item. Our first speaker is John Seymour.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. John Seymour from the nonprofit National Community Renaissance. And as you know, or may not know, we're the developers of Mission Cove Apartments, also Cape Cod Senior and La Mission. Speaking here today in support, actually. I think it's a good program. I'm not really sure the amount of money you're talking about to be taken away from the inclusionary housing fees, but it does make sense. In fact, we have residents that are living in our apartment home communities that are ready to move out into home ownership, and they strongly desire to live here in the city of Oceanside and not move up to the Inland Empire. So I think the program would work well. Having been involved in many of these types of programs, there's things that I would encourage you to add or consider. One would be auditing and compliance, quality control of the unit that the person or the family buys, whether it be a condo or a home. Make sure that it doesn't fall into zoning issues, code violations, leaky roofs, mold, things like that. Many first-time home buyers, without the need for government assistance, can afford to do the upkeep on their units. But there's a reason why they need to borrow 6 figures plus to be able to buy a home. There's a reason they don't have that down payment. Therefore, they often struggle to keep their properties up. We don't want to see this happening in Oceanside. So I think you need to have good follow-up on that. The other thing is to be careful on your inclusionary housing fund, whereby that is the main source of funds to address your most vulnerable residents here in Oceanside. Low-income families that are one step away from homelessness, people experiencing homelessness, veterans and seniors on your streets today. We borrow those inclusionary funds and we leverage them 3, 4, 5, 6 times with private and state funding sources. And without that sole money, little production would occur to help people that are greatly in need, vulnerable people. So I'm on support of this. I hope it works out well. God bless you. I'm here for any questions. Thank you.
No more speakers.
Thank you. I went over this as well, thinking what happens with maintenance. So with any home, there's always a toilet being replaced, a drain that's clogged, those kinds of things, and upkeep is a pretty serious expense. So I support going forward with this. I think staff can run with the information and come up with the necessary language to make this work. It's pretty out of the box thinking, I think, in general, but I think it has great merit. So I would move that approval as far as moving it forward.
Thank you. Councilmember Sanchez?
Thank you. Thank you. First, I want to congratulate staff on applying for additional housing vouchers and having been awarded 34. This just happened. It's through the HUD, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, and this is effective March 1st. It's for 34 new mainstream program housing vouchers that'll be available for non-elderly persons with disabilities. And these vouchers are for individuals as well as families to rent housing from private landlords and generally pay 30% of their monthly income towards rent and utilities. The award provides $502,456 for the first year for rental assistance payments to private Oceanside landlords, as well as administrative fees for CDC staff to administer the program. HUD thereafter provides ongoing funding for the new vouchers annually. So in terms of continuing to this challenge of meeting our housing needs, we're pretty far behind, and so I really appreciate all the staff's efforts in doing everything possible. These 34 are pretty much a godsend. Having said that, we do not have very many in lieu fees. In fact, our in lieu fee fund is very low. And partly it's because historically there was a decision by our council to lower the fees to just about practically zero for several years. So, but also we did a major project which took a while to do, but having done it, that's Mission Cove. It's a phenomenal project that we did along with La Mission. Those two projects in the valley did a whole lot, got us at least several affordable housing units. I am concerned about this because, I wish we had a lot more funds. And then because we already do have a home program, it does address a different demographic. I believe after talking with staff, we have maybe 6 people who are able to apply. It's not something that is something that everybody is able to apply for. So this is a different demographic. And I was trying to think of reasons really to try to support it. And so I did get a chance to talk with staff, talk with housing specialists, and say, okay, how can this make sense? Because I am concerned about foreclosures. I am concerned about the city becoming a bank of sorts. I am concerned that we just don't have all the funding. So this is to direct staff to see how much we can do. I'm thinking that maybe supporting this for that reason, to see what staff comes up with. I did get a chance to talk with John Seymour and asked him, well, you know, is this something that you could support, especially since he's been such a fantastic housing specialist for us here in Oceanside. And he did mention that there is kind of a bottleneck that's happening, that is with affordable housing units. At some point, folks are doing so well and having good credit that they need to get to another step, the next step, to make room for other folks who need those affordable housing units, and perhaps this might be able to be something that can help with that next step. So, you know, my concern is that this is not going to help us leverage. You know, we're talking, I guess, $1 million, maybe 14, I think it was 14, whereas what we just got through HUD is 34, and that was 502,000. So of course, the HUD project, the HUD program is going to help many more families, a lot less money, and these are, as I said, HUD funds. In lieu fees, we have so little. So not having all the information before me in terms of, you know, how successful this could be, certainly not having individuals coming to me and saying, look, this is a niche that we need to address. Perhaps Councilmember Rodriguez does, you know, have, you know, some input or has gotten some input as to that. I'm worried also about the administrative costs and how that might eat up funds that could actually go towards addressing our homeless, because we can use in lieu fees to address our homeless. So I guess the issue that I have with this is, where is our greatest need? Where is our greatest need? And I have to say that our greatest need are people who don't even have any shelter at all. And that is where, you know, especially for having the first winter, we did not have a winter shelter. This really breaks my heart that we don't have, you know, are not able to do that. Now that we have all the cities in North County coming together and saying, okay, we're going to address our homeless issues at the same time, so that it's, you know, not one city is going to get, say, maybe attract more because we have, you know, we're providing services, is something that's really exciting. So with the North County cities and having us, you know, telling us, hey, how about committing to sheltering half of the unsheltered in the, you know, in 2 years, and then the rest, you know, like after that. Can we commit to that? And our staff is looking into saying yes, you know, and how we can do that. And I think that's a great thing. I think our staff needs support in making sure that that happens. You know, $1 million. What can we do with $1 million? So we're saying maybe 14 families. You know, it's still tough. I want to support our efforts into housing all our income levels, but how can we deal with those that are in the most need, and those who we get the most complaints about? We have people that are out there helping, out there meeting our homeless and saying, okay, how can we help? How can we help coordinate all the services? So I want to thank you for doing that. It's just, Vanessa, thank you. I will, I guess, think about for the next few seconds, I guess, to try to decide how I'm going to do this, because, you know, if we had more money, this would be easier for me. But, you know, and I do hear John saying, well, you know, we do have this need. And maybe there are 14 families that can go to the next step. Thank you.
Councilmember Keim.
Yeah, I think Councilmember Rodriguez taking the initiative and exploring this is important. I think it's an overlooked section of the housing market and the challenges that a lot of our residents have. I have concerns as well, but that's why we're just bringing it to staff to explore and see if it's something that's feasible at that point. That's all it is. So if we bring a program that works and we can allay some of the concerns about foreclosures and how we're going to address that, that's fine. This is not an approval. This is just further look into this, so I'll support it for that reason.
And my comment would be is we got our comparable of the RENA numbers versus actual production, and one of the areas that we lack production is in the moderate affordability range. So I think this is a good idea for staff to evaluate and bring back, and I'll second Deputy Mayor's motion, and we have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved 4-0 with Councilmember Sanchez abstaining.
And we'll go quickly to item 20. Mr. Mullen.
Item 20 is the adoption of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Oceanside, California, amending Chapter 29A, Article 5, Section 29A.51 of the Oceanside City Code relative to oversized vehicular parking on Harbor Drive North.
Approval.
I'll move adoption. Second. Oh, you did? A second. We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
What time you got, Zeb?
We got 6 o'clock.
With that, we will go to our first public hearing item, which is resolutions approving a time extension for the Belvedere project, and I will open the public hearing and start with disclosures.
We've known of this project for probably 10 years. We had a couple of emails about it. That's it.
For this time extension, just staff.
I was present at the hearing of this originally, and this has been continued or received extensions several times, and I'm very familiar where it is. Thank you.
Staff.
Oh, and I did receive some public comment. Sorry.
Staff.
With that, we'll go to Stephanie.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. My name is Stephanie Cervantes, and I will be presenting the Belvedere Time Extension Project. For this project, staff and the Downtown Advisory Committee recommend that the City Council adopt a resolution approving a one-year time extension for the previously approved development plan and conditional use permits for the construction of a mixed-use development consisting of 90 live work units, 124 hotel rooms, and roughly 8,000 square feet of commercial space. This extension would expire on October 17, 2020, and it is the final extension that the project qualifies for. The site is located on a city block bounded by Mission Avenue on the north, Seagate Drive on the south, Horn Street on the east, and Clementine Street on the west. The surrounding land uses include a shopping center to the north, a residential to the south, offices to the west, and Oceanside High School to the east. This proposal was originally approved in 2012 and consists of 3-level parking structure with 352 parking spaces, 124 hotel rooms, 90 live work units, and 8,357 square feet of commercial space. In 2018, the City Council approved a request for a 2-year time extension. The current request is for 1 additional year, and it is the last time extension that the project qualifies for. There are no proposed changes with the request, and there are engineering and building plans that were submitted in 2019. The request for the time extension went to the Downtown Advisory Committee in October of 2019. DAC recommended approval with a 7-1 vote. At this time, staff has determined that the project is consistent with the zoning ordinance. The proposed development will enhance the property and surrounding neighborhood. The proposed and approved uses would provide additional housing and commercial opportunities in the area, and the time extension would allow the property owner additional time to complete the project. Staff and the Downtown Advisory Committee recommend approval of the 1-year time extension. I will be happy to answer any questions as well as the applicant.
At this point, we'll hear from the applicant.
Good evening. My name is John Kolasavage. As before, on October 23rd, Stephanie did an excellent presentation. I have nothing to add for that. We are simply looking for a 9-month time extension.
Thank you. Do we have public?
We have Joan Bachman.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I've been at every hearing for this. This is down the street from where I raised my kids. I then moved 3 blocks more to the south, but it's still my neighborhood. I've never been upset about the height or the density of this project. I am, however, looking at a very old project that wasn't that great to begin with. If you went up to the one they have in LA, it's ugly. Have any of you seen the one up in LA? I did all my due diligence on this thing, and they're not great developers. They have been coming back to us again and again. This project has been maxed out through various changes, and it was never an inspired project. I think it's time that we as a city basically stop begging. We do not need to beg anyone to build in our city. We have the last coastal bluff right there, the last coastal hill. This thing will have phenomenal views, and I think it's time that you free this land up for a better design, because this, it's an old design. There's nothing inspired about it. It's jam-packed in. It really doesn't have any architecture. It's square box sitting on the lot. It's all the way out to the edges. I'm not even sure that the parkways are protected, which is the key public space. And they really never thought about the public. And certainly they never thought about anyone at Oceanside High. So this is going to be a wall of windows looking right down at all of our students. If nothing else, there should be some landscaping, street trees, things like that on that side. But I think that they minimized the parkway, so that can't happen. So I think this is a very flawed design. They've come back and come back and come back. What they built in LA was not great. And if this is so great, surely they would have had a buyer who could have taken it off their hands and made it happen. So please vote no. Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Are there any other speakers? Seeing none, you have, as the applicant, rebuttal time if you'd like. If not,
No, we have no comment. Our goal here is just for a time extension, not to go over the redesign. Although we have heard concerns about the overwhelming new hotels within the area. So we would welcome the city's correspondence or conversation if we could make them maybe permanent residents rather than hotel components, or adjust the ratio. But we're ready to go ahead in October regardless.
Thank you. And that's a conversation you can have with the city planner at some point. Deputy Mayor, at that point, we'll close the public hearing. Deputy Mayor Feller?
Move adoption or approval.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Thank you. This has gone through several iterations. I don't know, I think this must have been the 3rd developer on this site. I think that initially This was the first project that we were even looking at higher heights, higher densities, and that was not the issue. It was, how are we going to make this a nice-looking project? The last iteration, which is this one, I like the idea of hotel rooms, and of course that's TOT. I never liked the idea of the live work parts of this, because unfortunately in our city they have met with failure. It's been really difficult to sell those, and especially there, I just don't see live work. The old Pac Bell, that was the first one that tried to make that work. That was what, 2002 or something like that. And it took a long time to sell that. Then we had the ones over on Vista Way, and that also was a very, very difficult sell. So we have this opportunity to have a different project there, something maybe more exciting now that so much has happened in the downtown area. You know, I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to talk. Perhaps you have other ideas besides this design, but I'll tell you, it's and I was trying to ask staff here, it's earlier than 2012 for sure. That must have been the last iteration of, you know, the last design change. When did we start with this project? Do you guys remember?
There was an earlier entitlement that was approved in the mid-2000s. This project was approved in 2012.
Yeah, I know when I saw that, I was like, well, I know it was long before that, because it has come back to us several times. The last one, I thought, well, you know, hotel rooms, great idea, and I thought that we had something nice, but then it didn't go forward. So while I appreciate that you're 9 months away, and you know it's a terrible time to be saying, hey, you know, maybe we could have done better. This has been since the early 2000s, and it's now 2020, and I think we ought to be able to just say, okay, enough is enough, no more extensions, we need something better. Thank you.
Councilmember Keim.
This is my first time being involved in the project. I would like to get more information if it's something that we can make successful. If not, but seeing as it's the last 9-month time extension, we'll have a final say in October. So I'm comfortable with that.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved, 4-1. Sanchez, no.
We'll go to item 13, which is a resolution approving a development plan and conditional use permits for a mixed-use project at 901 Pierview. And we'll open the public hearing and start with disclosures. 13.
Staff, mostly just staff.
Staff only.
Staff and I did have a conversation with the applicant.
No public.
Staff.
With that, we'll go to Mr. Rolltide.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor Weiss, distinguished council members, members of the public in attendance this evening. I'm Richard Greenbauer with the Planning Division, here to present a mixed-use project in the downtown area. This is the first of my 2 projects this evening in the downtown redevelopment area. And we have a request for a development plan and conditional use permit in order to construct a 4-story, 40,000 square foot mixed-use project on a 13,000 square foot lot at 901 Pierview Way. In order to construct on the site, there would be demolition of 2 single-family residences that currently operate as daycare facilities. Staff has worked since 2018 with the applicant, the architect, to come up with a nice design that is heavily articulated, provides activation on the street facing Pierview Way, as well as to the west. And in doing so, the applicant has brought forward a mixed-use project with 2,000 square feet of commercial space that is form-based in design, pushing it up to the streets to help with that pedestrian connectivity and activity on the street frontages. The residential component would be 12 apartment units, and those vary in size. I do have a layout
that I'll get to in just a moment. Providing a background of the area, to the left, the image shows the existing structure that would be demolished, appropriate photo documentation in accordance with our historic preservation is required for this and will be moved forward. The site is approximately a half mile from the North County Transit District, so it is a transit-oriented development, which has recently come into effect in the downtown area with some modifications to our zoning ordinance. The initial submittal predates those changes, but the application is consistent with all development standards prior to the adoption of the TOD standards for proximity to the transit district. With that, I provided a quick overview of the development standards showing exactly what's required per the zoning ordinance back in 2018 and how the applicant has provided that. As part of a mixed-use project, the merits of the project can allow for a 0-foot setback on the corner side, and staff supports that as designed. As I previously stated, it will activate those street frontages and comes up with a very nice design that accommodates approximately 22 on-site parking spaces to the eastern portion of the project site. Our new TOD standards allow for on-street parking for the commercial component, and the CUP would allow for this body to move forward with approval of the project with the current parking counts. So they are in complete conformance with the ordinance and bringing a suitable project forward. With that, I provide a quick overview of the 4-story structure and the space allocation. You'll see the first floor is dedicated to the commercial, and that is fronting the street with the parking to the east. The second floor would have 4 one-bedroom units, 2 two-bedroom units, so providing a very diverse mix of affordability in units to the surrounding public. And then floor 3 would have 2 one-bedroom units, 3 two-bedroom units, and then the 4th floor is dedicated for a penthouse with 3 bedrooms and also a 600 square foot accessory dwelling unit as part of that penthouse. Staff is in full compliance and conformance with the ordinance and the direction that the applicant has brought forward this evening. With that, staff recommends that the Community Development Commission adopt the resolution approving the development plan and conditional use permit. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
No setback means no.
This is a public hearing. Do we have speakers?
No sidewalk?
Yes, we do. Our first speaker is Joan Bachman, to be followed by James Bickel.
Again, Mayor and council members. On this site, when you look at the way we did the Coast Highway Plan, there was a key learning, which was avenues and nodes. And if this has the mixed use with the commercial, it's causing commercial sprawl. It's going to hurt Mission Avenue. And so I don't believe there should be commercial on Seagaze. I think that should be a residential street. I think it would do better as a residential street. And I would like to see the first floor of this be residential and not commercial. Also, let's see. Oh, I'm sorry, this one's on the other side. I'm sorry. Well, it's still going to be spreading out our commercial, and that is not a good plan. So we should really be looking at all of our streets and figuring out where commercial should be and where residential should be, and not just having mixed use everywhere. The main thing I was here for is that we are losing 4 canopy trees on this. There are 3 interior to the site, and then there's 1 very large one on the corner, and they are not being replaced. They're actually talking about replacing them with invasive Mexican fan palms. I can't believe that. That is an invasive plant. They are popping up all over the city. We have thousands of them downtown, and I think it's time to say no. We do not need any more of those. We need actual canopy trees. A recent show with Nan Sturman showed the temperature on the asphalt around trees that don't provide canopy and trees that do. It's quite a bit different. And so there's absolutely nothing to screen this building. So we should have a minimum of 3 canopy trees on each side. So something like jacaranda, something that would get big enough and grow big enough. They can be pruned to fit the parkway. there. So, and absolutely do not add palm trees. That's insane here. And I'm not real thrilled with the architecture either, but I don't know, after the last vote, I'm very discouraged about architecture in our town. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm James Bickle from Bickle Group Architects. We're the architecture firm who designed the project. Been working with Richard Greenbauer for a number of years, and actually we have a long history together. It's been enjoyable. We appreciate all his help. I think he's done a fantastic job in creating a presentation. If we're here to answer any questions, there's a representative from the ownership partnership here as well if you happen to have any questions, but we just want to let you know that we're here, we're excited about the project, and want to make ourselves available if you have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a public hearing. Are there any other speakers? Seeing none, I'll close the public input portion. Deputy Mayor Feller.
Thank you. I was here when those homes were remodeled, and they did a great job of remodeling them, but if they're not used, it's another example of homes needing the wear and tear, and I think it's a great project for the area. The one thing that concerns me a little bit is the deep gutters, and I don't know how you would fix that. But if you are to go in that alley that runs between the two, that runs east-west, it's a pretty deep gutter, and so if you're going to allow street-side parking, some of that might have to be looked at. I'm not really sure how it affects what you need to do there. And the parking is covered, and is that a covered parking behind it?
Deputy Mayor Feller, that is correct. It's a covered parking space. There are some exterior spaces as part of that 22, but a majority is covered underneath the building.
And it is, does this have any kind of solar?
Nothing that was proposed as part of the entitlement review, but I'm sure the applicant will move something forward, and I'll let him address that.
Okay. Frankly, I like palm trees, so I guess that's just bad taste when you live in Oceanside. Thanks. I move approval.
Councilmember Sanchez.
And I was wondering if is it possible to change the landscaping? Would you be open to changing landscaping? Seems like in other parts of the downtown, there's, and I don't know how accurate the picture is, the colored picture that you have here in terms of landscaping, because on one it looks like it's very narrow, the sidewalk, and if you're having commercial space on the first floor, which is what I see, I'm just wondering if you would have more opportunities for different kinds of businesses if you have a wider sidewalk and maybe have a shade tree or two, rather than the kind of like what the picture shows. Because I think that the landscaping is kind of not consistent with what we're doing in other places and trying to have a wider sidewalk and ensuring, pedestrian, because we are talking about half a mile away from the transit center, and maybe having bike rack or something like that. And so close to the downtown, is there any way that we can discuss the landscaping? Is that something that you're amenable to? Talking to yes, would you come back to the podium? Thank you. I see one bike rack.
Yeah, to clarify, we do have bike racks on the project, absolutely. This is actually a fairly challenging site, to be honest with you,
right,
because it's a very small site.
Yeah.
And it is quite a bit of slope to it. And this is somewhat of a joke, but you're probably familiar with the adage, form follows function, part of the mid-century modern movement. In my office, we kind of have an adage that form follows parking. And I say that because to get that underground parking that we were talking about, and you start laying on this very narrow site, and when you factor in the retaining walls that are required on the east side, it kind of backs you down to what space is available. So on the Pierview Street side, we actually did pull the building back to allow for some additional landscaping. We have almost some...
You mean the 10-foot? The 10-foot setback?
Yeah, we have a larger setback on
Right.
Pierview. I don't have the plan right open in front of me, but we did whatever we could do on the side. But again, kind of laying it out on
And
the
on the
Clementine
corner, it's zero,
side.
right?
I'm sorry?
On the corner, it's zero, right?
Yes.
That's what you're, yeah.
But along Clementine, we were very limited to the parkway that we could put there, quite honestly.
Right.
So personally, I think we're open to work with staff and come up, if there's another workable tree that fits kind of within the parkway area, I'm okay with looking at that.
Right.
I'm not guaranteed, just because of the physical constraint of the size that we have to work with, that we're going to fit a 30-foot canopy tree there.
Yeah,
but
not a big tree. Maybe something, because it could be that this picture is not to scale, and so it just looks like the sidewalk is minimalized, where you have the landscaping. And it's possible that it's not really to scale, and it, because I think what you want to emphasize is the walkability of it, the pedestrian piece of it, you do have a bike rack, but maybe have more of a sense of wanting people to walk around. I mean, you're encouraging people to come to the commercial part of it. So just
I
wondered.
agree. Part of what we worked with staff with was also, though, trying to create a little bit of that urban character. And that was a directive from all of staff throughout this 2-year plus process. So getting the storefront and the building up near the public right-of-way was, it kind of worked. We had that parking issue that I talked about, and then it
Right.
kind of worked to push the building. So there just wasn't an opportunity to put a much larger pedestrian green belt along Clementine.
I just would like to clarify that as part of the final landscape design, you are open to considering trees that are alternate to the palm trees.
Sure, we'll take a look at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I could elaborate, the landscape plans before you are virtually always conceptual, and with the final building plans, we work with the city's landscape architect, and also we have to accommodate other uses that get finalized, such as stormwater. So while we can consider not having palms, even though we actually heard from one of your members that they like palms, it's really up to the final building plans. And staff, including the landscape architect and planning, believe that palms, while not appropriate in every spot, they don't provide shade necessarily. There are times when they are appropriate. Narrow landscape strips, screening a tall facade, lining a boulevard corridor, etc. They are also considered iconic in beach towns. So I think the idea that we shouldn't have any new palms in our city is a little extreme. While some cases are not appropriate, we'll continue to find places where they are appropriate.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. And so you are open to that, maybe that, because that doesn't have to be, this is not being, the landscaping, this specific, picture is not what we're approving tonight, right? So I would urge you to, to work with staff on that, make it more pedestrian friendly. And I hear you, maybe some kind of urban furniture type thing, I mean, here you are, you're obviously thinking out of the box. There are different things you can do to make it, pop. So,
Sure.
thank
Okay.
you.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Mr. Brego, I have a quick question about this project in reference to I see the application date on this, and it's been, almost 2 years, and we're at this juncture now. The new streamlined development pathway that we've moved on, just as an example, with a project like this, from start to finish, instead of being 2 years, what would you have estimated a project like this taking to push through?
Honorable Mayor and Council members, well, oftentimes the timing of a project is driven by the CEQA determination. In this case, I think we would actually be able to shave several months off the project. It's kind of hard to speculate because of that CEQA question, but certainly with the streamlining efforts that we've implemented recently, it would be substantially reduced in terms of the amount of time to process it.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I want to second Deputy Mayor Jack Feller's motion. I think the project looks great. I wish we could add a few more units. This is the ideal spot we need to be building, so it is what it is. I think it's going to be a beautiful project, and a lot of happy new Oceanside residents will be living there. And thank you very much for doing business in our city.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
By vote.
We'll go to item 14, which is resolutions approving a project at 146 South Myers, and we'll open the public hearing and start with disclosures.
Just staff and drive by the project.
Staff reports.
Staff.
No public.
Staff.
With that, we'll go to Mr. Greenbrower.
Honorable Mayor Weiss, distinguished council members, members of the public in attendance. My second item tonight, let me get that turned on, is a simple request for a redevelopment of a site referred to as 146 South Myers. This body previously reviewed similar redevelopment on 150 and at 152 South Myers. And the applications in front of you this evening include a tentative parcel map, development plan, conditional use permit, and regular coastal permit. The applications would allow for the demolition of a multifamily duplex. Currently, it's established on a site with no on-site parking that will be corrected with this redevelopment. That's consisting of a 3-story, 4-unit condo building. Those are stacked townhouses, approximately 6,000 square feet in size on a 4,500 square foot lot. Density requires that a conditional use permit be brought forward, and that's part of your action this evening. Quick aerial overview of the site. This is in downtown district, sub-district 5. You can see it is immediately adjacent to the North County Transit District. Once again, transit-oriented type development solely for residential in this area. And I don't have an image of the previous developments, but it's similar in nature. Staff in reviewing the development standards found that the project is in 100% compliance with the zoning ordinance and those development standards established. 27% of the landscaping on the site, 17 will be within yard areas, and then 10% is allowed per code for to be used via private decks, and we do have rooftop decks under the 35-foot height limit on this site. I've provided another space allocation for the 4 units. It's 3 levels stacked with private rooftop decks. Parking would be at grade with an individual unit access from a garage accessing directly off Myers. Second floor would be the bedroom areas, and then the third floor would have the great room / living room and kitchen areas. With that, staff recommends that the Community Development Commission adopt a resolution approving the tentative map, development plan, conditional use permit, and regular coastal permit. And I'm available for any questions.
Do we have any public, Mr. City Clerk?
We have one speaker, Joan Bachman.
We need to go to the, hold on, Joan. We need to go to the applicant. I'm sorry. Yes.
Hi, I'm Doug Darrowan, applicant here. I live at 5081 Bella Colina here in Oceanside. Any questions?
Don't see any.
I'll make a couple of comments. Last year, perhaps maybe 18 months ago, we approved a project almost identical to this next door. We changed some of the architecture on the outside. I think the council at that time was very happy with the project, some of the things we did, and we were able to get access to the roof without building large roof access, I don't know what you call them. Yeah, we kept that roof line nice and clean. It's a great project where it's located. You can walk to the train station, and it would be a great property to own if you were a commuter going to LA, San Diego, or inland on the Sprinter, because you could live there and never have to take your car out. Somewhat high density, but that's kind of where we're going. We did get 3 bedrooms and 3 baths in these units, and it's plenty of living space for a family, young family, or they're not going to be vacation rentals. They're going to be sold off to families and hopefully bring that kind of, life to Oceanside. Any questions?
Don't see any. Thank you very much.
Okay, you bet.
Council and Mayor. On this one, I did want to correct one thing in the staff report. While the roof decks are technically below the height limit, what we're seeing in practice is that people put little wire structures up or something, and they're stringing party lights all over, which is effectively adding a story to all of the developments. And we have a view down the hill, and there's all these party lights down there. You can see it right on Ditmar, right over here, and they keep them on all the time. So we need to do something about lights that are up on top of people's houses that are not holiday lights, and that just sit there on all the time, effectively adding a nighttime next story to the residents that live around it. The other thing, I appreciate him saying they won't be vacation rentals. That is probably the biggest problem with the availability of rentals in our neighborhood are these short-term rentals that are driving prices up. They're driving home prices up. They're driving rents up, and they're ruining our neighborhoods. So the fewer short-term rentals, the better. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Are there any other speakers? Seeing none, we'll close the public input portion. Deputy Mayor Feller.
Thank you. There are parking meters in front of this. Is that correct?
That is correct. There would be a removal of one space in order to accommodate the driveway to provide on-site parking.
Okay, so do we have a fee? I'm forgetting what our parking enforcement does. Is there a that is for parking in metered parking throughout the city? I can't recollect right now. It just came up in my head about the parking meters. Is there like a parking pass that works for the meters?
Not yet.
Okay. That I just thought I'd get it out here. I move approval.
Councilmember Sanchez.
Thank you. Yeah, it did look similar to what you did before, or what's there. And I like your comments about the top and not doing the extra shaft up there. So I'm going to go ahead and second the motion to adopt the resolution. Thank you.
Councilmember Rodriguez.
Quick question, Mr. Greenbauer. From my understanding with respect to the roof space, we had some council agenda items come up early last year in reference to the argument of removing the 10% variance above the height limit to allow for, patio space, those sort of dynamics. From my understanding, that still applies, that, a potential development can go above the roof line to accommodate a elevator shaft, those sort of dynamics. That is allowed. I want to just clarify that really quick from my understanding.
Correct. At this time, that is still allowed. The square footage or the 10% rule that you're alluding to.
Got it. And will there be, I did not see anybody, there's not going to be an elevator to a common space in this project? It'll just be stairs in each individual unit, is that correct?
That's my understanding, Councilmember Rodriguez.
Okay, perfect. Okay, thank you. No further questions.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Approve, 5-0.
I've been asked to take a short break, so we will reconvene at 6:50. Oceanside City Council, and we will go to public hearing item 15, which is council member call for review regarding a planning city planner's determination on the zoning boundary at 1643 South Pacific, and we will open the public hearing and start with disclosures.
Public, as well as the appellant.
The applicant, staff, and the public.
Staff, the appellant, and members of the public and neighbors, and I've been by the site several times.
Staff and the neighbors. Thank you.
Staff, appellant, public, and site visit.
You're up.
Mayor Weiss, City Council. My name is Shannon Vitale, and I'm a planner with the Development Services Department. I am here tonight to discuss Agenda Item 15, a council member call for review regarding the zoning district boundary between the RT District and R1 District as it relates to 1643 South Pacific Street. Staff recommends that City Council adopt a resolution upholding the Planning Commission Resolution 2019 P50, which upholds the city planner's determination that the property at 1643 South Pacific Street has a zoning designation of R1, single family. The project site is located on the west side of Pacific Street, mid-block between Morse Street and Cassidy Street. There is currently a 4,172 square foot single family residence on the site. As explained in the staff report, staff determined the property to have a zoning designation of R1. Parcels to the south of the project site are zoned R1, while parcels to the north have an RT zoning designation. An application to convert the existing single-family dwelling into 3 units was received in January of 2019. At that time, the city's GIS zoning map indicated the parcel was zoned RT. A citizen inquiry in May of 2019 prompted planning staff to research the zoning district boundary between the R1 and RT districts. While the city's GIS zoning map indicated the subject parcel was zoned RT, when looking at the certified 1986 coastal zoning map, as shown on this slide, staff concluded the parcel was zoned R1. As illustrated on the image to the left, the R1 zoning district boundary extends to the north right-of-way of Whaley Street and includes the subject parcel, which is circled in red. The image on the right illustrates the zoning district boundary line as it relates to Whaley Street. As indicated here, the district boundary between the RT and R1 aligns with the north right-of-way of Whaley. A zoning determination letter was issued to the property owner on September 13th of 2019. The letter informed the owner that the subject property was zoned R1 and a 3-unit project was not permitted. Pursuant to Section 240 of the zoning ordinance, a city planner interpretation can be appealed to the Planning Commission. An appeal was submitted to the city clerk's office on September 18th. Staff brought the item to the Planning Commission on November 18th of that year. The Planning Commission voted 6-1 to deny the appeal and uphold the city planner's determination regarding the zoning district boundary as it relates to 1643 South Pacific. On November 25th, 2019, a call for review was submitted by Council members Rodriguez and Deputy Mayor Feller. The call for review requests City Council to review the Planning Commission's decision regarding the zoning designation. The appellant has made the following arguments as reasons to appeal the city planner's decision. Staff's responses are provided in italics and further explained in the staff report, which was prepared for the Planning Commission hearing and was included as attachment to the City Council staff report. The appellant states that the zoning district boundary change should occur at block address changes. While staff acknowledges the address numbers north of Whaley are in the 1600s and the address numbers south of Whaley are in the 1700s, this is not the basis for determining the zoning boundary. The certified zoning map is the appropriate means to determine the boundary. The second basis of appeal stated the zoning district boundary change should be represented as a line drawn down the center of Whaley Street. As explained in the staff report, staff used several tools and methods to determine the location of the zoning district boundary. The boundary was determined to be on the north side of Whaley, not the center line. The third basis of appeal also relates to the zone boundary centered on Whaley Street. As previously mentioned, staff used several tools and determined that the zone boundary aligned with the north right-of-way of Whaley, not the center line. Multiple exhibits were presented in the Planning Commission staff report as well as the City Council report to demonstrate this. The fourth basis of appeal stated that if 2/3 of the subject property was zoned RT, that the entire property should be zoned RT. As stated earlier, the exhibits provided in the staff report illustrate the zone boundary on the northern property line, and thus the entire parcel would be zoned R1. However, even if the property were split zoned, there is no provision in the zoning ordinance that states that a parcel with a split zoning should automatically be zoned the majority of the zone. A zone amendment would be required for the remainder of the parcel. On December 18, 2019, staff received a letter from the appellant's attorney listing reasons for the City Council to overturn the Planning Commission's decision upholding the city planner's determination. The first reason stated that the LCP land use map should determine the zoning designation. Staff acknowledges the land use map is inconsistent with the zoning map. The land use designation of the subject property is high-density residential. This land use designation supports R3 zoning and RT zoning. However, a zone amendment would be required to change the zoning designation from R1. The second reason the appellant's attorney stated as a reason to overturn the zoning determination is that the property was previously zoned RT and staff changed the zoning to R1. Staff did not rezone the subject property. As explained in the staff report, staff utilized the hard copy of the certified zoning map to determine the subject property had an R1 zoning designation. The third basis of appeal stated the city planner relied on the center line of Whaley Street. Planning staff did not rely on the center line argument to determine the zoning boundary. Per section 220.b of the zoning ordinance, where contiguous properties are classified in different zoning districts, the center line of the street or right-of-way shall be the district boundary unless otherwise depicted on the zoning map. As stated earlier, staff utilized the zoning map to determine the designation. The appellant's attorney also stated that the city planner based the zoning determination on two additional factors: that the existing residence is a single-family home and that the public beach access is on the north property line. Planning staff did not make this argument because a single-family residence exists on the property that it must be zoned R1. Additionally, although planning staff recognizes the public access on the north property line may be a possible basis for the zone boundary, staff did not consider this when reviewing the zoning map, because it was speculative. Staff utilized the certified zoning map to determine the zoning designation. In conclusion, staff recommends that the City Council adopt a resolution upholding the city planner's determination that the zoning district boundary between the residential tourist district and the single-family residential district, as it affects property located at 1643 South Pacific Street, is located on the northern property line of the property. This concludes my presentation, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, we will go to the appellant, who has 15 minutes, and followed by the, which would be Mr. Gonzalez and Mr. Stensrud, who would also have 15 minutes, up to 15 minutes for their presentations. Once those are done, then we will go to the public.
Thank you. Good evening. Mark Dillon, resident of Oceanside and counsel for the owner of the subject property. We have submitted letters and attachments into the record that address the issues summarized by staff. Those materials outline why the subject property, in our view, is entirely within the residential tourist or RT zone. The problem is that the city planner found the property to be located as indicated in the R1 zone. But the city's local coastal program map general plan shows unambiguously that the property is designated high-density residential. Our first point, placing the property in the R1 zone would not reconcile the zoning with the city's general plan and local coastal program. We believe staff's interpretation should reconcile the zoning with your general plan, with your local coastal program, not find a conflict or a inconsistency. Our second primary point was touched on by staff. At the time of the application, the city had determined that the GIS mapping, the GIS zoning map showed that the property was in the RT zone. Then the city changed its GIS mapping on the property from RT to the R1 zone. The applicant reasonably relied on these prior statements, public information, when purchasing the property, when filing its application under an RT zone. And in our view, the city can't change that zoning for the property without affording due process to the applicant and going through the proper procedural steps. Our third point is based on new law enacted as a result of SB 330. It's the Housing Crisis Act. It's a new law that's also relevant. It prohibits cities from downzoning property to reduce the amount of housing units. That is what is happening here if the City Council votes to zone the property R1. It would go from a 3-unit condominium complex to a 2-unit complex. Our fourth point is we are aware of opposition argument that the zone should be divided based on beach or public access. Public access is not an indicator of zoning, and we agree with your staff that using beach or public access is speculative and has no place. For the reasons summarized here and for the reasons outlined in our correspondence to you, we do ask the council to overturn staff's determination and reconcile your zoning with your local coastal program, with your general plan, and confirm the property remains within the RT zone. We thank you, and I will reserve whatever time I have for rebuttal, if any. Thanks again.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Marco Gonzalez. I'm an attorney with KOCT Law Group. Many moons ago, I ran the Surfrider Foundation, San Diego County chapter. About 20 years ago, I spent a fair bit of time in this city looking at properties in South Oceanside, looking at beach access in South Oceanside, and looking into the history of the city's LCP and really the problems that we all know existed between the 1986 and the 1992 zoning ordinance issues with the Coastal Commission. And so when some of the residents came to me and said, hey, we have a problem over here at 1643, I immediately said, oh, you mean the one next to the beach access stairs? And they're like, yeah, how do you know about that? Well, again, 20 years ago, I spent an awful lot of time digging deep into the files, and unfortunately, a lot of the folks who were around back then aren't anymore. The staff has turned over. Actually, the mayor and I did some work on various projects when he was a member of staff, a director in engineering, but really a lot of that institutional history is gone, and in situations like this where we're going back and looking at the old maps and trying to deduce what actually happened, I think it's really important that we pay attention to what is actually in the documents and what history tells us. But first and foremost, this entire issue is predicated on the notion that the applicant went to the city's GIS viewer and said, hey, I looked at this map and this map told me it was an RT zone and therefore you're bound by that. And conspicuously missing is any rebuttal to the disclaimer that's put on that GIS map. And this is on every city's GIS map. It's very clearly, you have to articulate it, you have to hit the accept button. You can't use this map for anything other than very high level preliminary information. It's not intended as an excuse or to supplant your due diligence. And if there's one thing we know about this particular applicant, in this case, he's very experienced here in the city of Oceanside, and very experienced coming in after purchasing a property and seeking to have changes made to it. And so I think there is a little bit of a waiver question that the applicant really has to shoulder on his own. Moving on, there were some representations made in the correspondence from the attorneys for the appellant, stating that these public stairs did not exist until 1990, until the Coastal Commission or the city required them to be put in place. Most recently this afternoon, in seeking to rebut some information that I had given to staff, they doubled down on this idea that there was actually no public access stairs prior to 1990. Now, what I've pointed out there in the top red arrow is a public access from the top above by Whaley Street that actually predates all of this. This goes back to the 60s when the condominium complex immediately above that bluff access there, what was constructed, they made way when they had to concrete that entire bluff. They made an opportunity for them to come down and still access the beach via the two parcels that are immediately to the north of the subject parcel that at the time were owned by the city. And you can see in this 1972 photograph that at that time the beach access stairs in fact did exist. This picture from 1979 showed some evolution of the beach armoring, but that stair access still existed at that time. Now, if we want to know, did the city actually know that there was beach access here before it created the 1985 land use map? There's another document that I've attached to the handout that I've given you. It's a 1976 document entitled Agreement Establishing Boundary Line. This agreement was the result of the owner of the subject property and the city, who owned the adjacent property, deciding that they needed to figure out where the boundary of these parcels were. And you'll see highlighted in that document reflected language that says the boundary is the chain link fence adjacent to and parallel with the beach access stairway along the southeasterly edge of said above described lot 30, which was that city-owned property. This beach access existed in the 60s. It existed at the time that the map was created. And this beach access point, along with these parcels, created what I call the natural buffer between the RT and the R1 zone. And put yourself in the shoes of city planners at the time. They know that the city owns the lot, the two lots. They know that the city someday is going to divest itself of those lots. The city is not in the position to own the beachfront lots, as a commercial speculator. So they put on it the maximum possible value zone that they could for that area. And that single-family residence that existed demarked at that time the edge of the lesser dense R1 zone. So moving forward, again, we have to look back at what was going on at the time that these maps were created. And it's kind of tough because in 2015, we went to the Coastal Commission to clean up our zoning ordinance, and we eliminated a number of provisions that actually give us good guidance as to what people were thinking at the time that the zoning ordinance was approved. The details of what was eliminated versus not, I'm going to put up a couple things that were eliminated and then talk about how the new code actually addresses it. So first, it was clear in the old code that the zoning map controlled. We all know that that does. But this was one of the more important ones because a lot of what the applicant focuses on is this government code section 65860, mandating consistency between the zoning ordinance and the land use map. And even in 1985, when the zoning ordinance was first adopted, or in 86, they recognized that there would be inconsistencies between the two of them, and this is how they were harmonized. They said, look, we know that state law requires these to be read together. And here's the deal. In a situation where you have a zone that allows a greater density than that specified on the map, the maximum density shall be that allowed on the map. Now, what does that mean? That means the city is taking the position that you get the least amount of density when you're comparing the map to the zone. And what's important is when we look at the elimination of this provision in 2015 and what the city replaced it with, we go to the consolidated code at 220G under conflict with other regulations, and it clearly states, and this is the law today in the city, where a conflict exists, the more restrictive provision shall control. The more restrictive provision in the discrepancy between the land use map and the zoning code is the R1 lesser dense zone. That's really the end of story as far as the law is concerned. But as we have talked about, there was also this provision back in the old code on uncertainty of boundaries. And the way it was written, contemporaneous with the maps that were produced, was that we would follow street and alley lines or lot lines to determine where the boundaries of these zones were. And what's important is when the code was updated in 240B, it clearly says that we're still going to follow such rights-of-way or boundary lines or lot lines that tell us where the zone boundary should be. And most importantly, we go down to 240B subsection 5, that if uncertainty still remains, if you're still not convinced, we turn to the city planner. And in this case, the city planner at the planning commission level made a very clear evidence-based analysis that suggests that, in fact, we are in the R1 zone. I think that the appellant is well represented and they made as good a case as they could. However, at the end of the day, even if they were correct, it's not an opportunity for the council to simply do a rezone from the dais. If they were correct, we would have to go back and amend the maps and amend the code. And very importantly, up until January 1st of last year, the requirement that your code match up with your map didn't exist. SB 1330 was passed in 2018. It became effective January 1st, 2019, and that was the first time that that requirement applied to charter cities. Now that's important because case law interpreting this provision says that cities have a reasonable amount of time to bring their zoning ordinance into compliance with their land use maps. And what is a reasonable amount of time? The only cases that exist out there interpreting that suggest it can be a couple years, it can be a few years. And I would say in a situation where we have for a number of years been going back to the Coastal Commission to try to harmonize and bring together our 86 and 92 codes under a consolidated code, we're still within that reasonable window. So if there's a process for an LCP amendment that we need to go through to address the inconsistencies, we can do it, but we can't do it from the dais, not legally. That being said, I'm through with my presentation, and I'm going to have Mr. Stensrud come on up and give a couple additional comments. But thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to defer to a couple of other speakers that you've heard my voice many times, so I'm just going to hand out something, if I could. Should be 6 there. And I'm just going to say that we are basically strongly support the planning decision, excuse me, to retain 1643, excuse my language, and also to reinforce the city planning 6-1 decision. And I just would like to just show 2 pictures. And one picture is now, this was the applicant when he bootlegged about three years after 97. This was a pool that he illegally put in, and it took us 3 months working with the code enforcers, and that was taken out. And for 50 years, this was the Sharp residence. 50 years, 3 bedrooms. In 17, when it was bought, the applicant immediately bootlegged in and then was advertising 8 bedrooms, 38 persons allowable. And with that, I'm going to leave with an old Marine Corps saying, and that is, speak little and do big. And so I'm going to speak little and get out of here with one last question. I've been asked by a number of our people, why was this a review called, and for what reason was the applicant saved $1,839 No one in our community that has had that item ever was granted that privilege. Thank you. There's a couple of other speakers for the 15 minutes. Ty Kaler. Come on. You got, show them the picture that you had. Anyone else? We had about 5 speakers, but we'll leave it with that.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, and I'm presuming most of those people have put their names in.
Yes. Our first speaker is Rennie Dowling, to be followed by Bradley Hay, to be followed by Diana Davis, to be followed by Peter Rodriguez.
I'm Rennie Dowling, and I'm here to support the Planning Commission's finding that this property, 1643 South Pacific Street, is a single-family resident and R1 property. Please keep it that way. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bradley Hay. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. We're basically here because the city planner's determination that 1643 South Pacific, being in the R1 zone, is inconsistent with the city's land use element and general plan. There was no mention of the land use element of the general plan in its original zoning determination letter back in September. There was no mention of this in the staff report to the Planning Commission. There was only a very brief mention of it at the Planning Commission meeting as part of the PowerPoint, with no discussion of the implications of the general plan and zoning map being incongruous. Finally, there is only a small comment on inconsistencies between the two on tonight's staff report. This is the real issue. California Government Code 65860 states that all land use ordinances and policies must flow from the general plan and must be consistent with the general plan. Zoning ordinances must also be consistent with the general plan and are invalid if inconsistent. This makes both the zoning determination and the Planning Commission's agreement invalid. Furthermore, any decrease in density is now illegal in the state of California, according to SB 330. Changing the general plan use designation, specific plan land use designation, or zoning of a parcel or parcels of property to a less intensive use is now illegal. The current staff report states that R3 zoning is supported by the land use designation of high-density residential. This is not the case, as R3 is medium density. In contrast, there are multiple other high-density residential areas zoned RT, including the entirety of the 1600 block and large swaths of downtown. RT is consistent with high-density. R1 is illegal as it goes against the general plan, being single family, and R3 is also inappropriate as it is medium density residential. The only lawful decision, with case law backing it up, is to reverse the Planning Commission's decision and follow California law by being consistent with the general plan and not decreasing density. This can only be done by keeping 1643 South Pacific in the RT zone. Thank you.
Diana Davis, to be followed by Peter Rodriguez, to be followed by Tig Haller, I apologize if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, and to be followed by Terrence Pagel.
If he called your name, you can come up to either podium and be ready.
Good evening, council members. My name is Diana Davis. I'm a resident of Oceanside, 1150 Midnight Way. I am speaking to support the applicant, and I'm reading a letter from one of our neighbors on the 1700 block, to whom it may concern. When the applicant first purchased the home next door to mine, I was apprehensive about the idea of having weekly renters coming and going. I thought the worst: loud parties, parking difficulties, trash, and cigarette butts over the fence, etc. But the reality was much different. The applicant was a very attentive property owner. He gave me his personal phone number and told me to call if I had any concerns. He was true to his word. If I called about a concern, the situation was resolved. I had been having problems with the homeless people camping out on my beachside patio. They often left a mess, and in some instances were confrontive and aggressive. Once the property to the north was taken over by the applicant, that stopped. I felt safer in my own house.
When he was working on the remodel plans for the house, he shared them with me so that I knew what was happening, and he assured me that the remodel was not going to obstruct my view. When we had to make decisions regarding shared space, he let me take the lead to make choices. He remodeled the property, which upgraded the property values for all. His maintenance crews were efficient and friendly. If I saw them doing something that I was not happy with, all I had to do was say something to them. They were efficient and courteous. All in all, the applicant was the best neighbor I had during my 17 years of residence at 1735 South Pacific Street. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I was given a letter by Virginia Stoner, who is a resident at 1219A South Pacific Street, and it is for the applicant. My husband, Dr. William Stoner, and I bought this property over 30 years ago and built the existing condominium for our summer beach home for our family. My husband passed away in 2002, and now the Stoner Family Trust owns the lower unit. My winter home is in Indian Wells now, and our children's family still enjoys summers at the oceanfront property. In July, possession of the upstairs unit was taken by a new property management company. I have had 3 or 4 renters upstairs now and have noticed that they were all well informed as to the need from respect for me and my space regarding noise, shared beachfront, fire pit use, and car parking has never been a problem or issue. In closing, I want you to know my experience and delight with the property management company as my new upstairs neighbors. I have been blessed to have lived here in Oceanside all these many summers, 35 years in total. And I look forward to more years hosting my desert neighbors and family here with such a caring and concerned neighbor upstairs. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to voice my compliments to the property management company and to the Oceanside City and Planning Department. Very sincerely, Virginia Stoner. Thank you for your time.
Honorable Mayor and council members, my name is Ty Kaler. I'm located 2 lots north of the subject property, 1637 South Pacific Street. Thank you for this opportunity. My first comment was for the previous readers. It appears that perhaps the appellant's employees or something are speaking and reading letters and so forth. There was a previous speaker, Deanna Davis. I would like to correct a few things that she said. Whoever wrote that letter, they must have sold the property to Mr. Fischbach, and whatever happened 17 years ago or however many years ago is not relevant. The adjacent neighbors, both 1701 and 1639, the properties adjacent to the subject property, have both retained legal counsel and have put multiple complaints against the subject property. And so just to be clear, whatever that letter was is totally irrelevant. I'd like to keep my comments brief and just reiterate a couple things that have been stated. We do support the Office of the City Planner's determination. We support the Planning Commission's decision and so forth to keep the property as R1. And that, as stated up there, that the staff has confirmed that the 1986 ZO map is authoritative. And the second point I'd like to make, there has been some dispute whether or not there are beach access stairs, and I would just like to throw out, can I have the time, please? I don't have it up here.
You have 1 minute, 20 seconds.
Okay. Just to be clear, this is the current beach access stairs. Just want to give a picture of it. That's 1643 there on the left, which is and 1639 in the south. That separates the R1 and RT zones. Here's another quick little picture looking down at the beach, just so you know they exist. This is the 1976 agreement establishing the boundary, where you can see down there highlighted where it actually references the beach access stairs. So if you need a 1976 agreement prior to all this, here it is. This is the 1985 determiners report by the Coastal Commission. You'll note the beach access stairs on the left side of the drawing, and the print's pretty small there, but this was part of the project. The house was built in 85, 86 and had to be approved by the Coastal Commission, so they're clearly denoted there. One final comment, any reference to block addresses and so forth. The entire block from from Buccaneer Beach to Cassidy Street, that's all Block E. Any reference to the word block has a special name in California code. This is the block. We're all on Block E. The legal definition of block does not refer to addresses. Thank you very much.
To be followed by Joel West, to be followed by Carolyn Wilt.
My name is Terrence Pago. I live at 1629 South Pacific Street. My uncle purchased that property in 1956. I was 10 years old. I've lived at that property off and on since then. I went to the beach. I spent a lot of time on the beach. Anybody that doesn't think that there were stairs there in the 60s hasn't been here long enough or hasn't done their due diligence. If I understood the applicant's discussion, there was some discussion about when the stairs went in. I can't give you a date, but I can damn sure tell you they were there in the 60s. I used them. And we had relatives that came up and visited, and they used them. When somebody goes out and buys a piece of property with any intentions of doing anything to it, besides just living there, there's a risk. You put your money in a bank, there's a risk. You put your money in stocks, there's a risk. They went out and they bought this property with a risk. They thought they could overcome the risk by getting the Planning Commission to change the zoning. I went to the Planning Commission's forum in November. The person representing the applicant at that time was Paul. I don't know his last name. And he was indignant over the fact that that gentleman there, I don't know your name, I'm sorry, changed. And he changed it on us. He told us it was R1 and went back to RT without any reason and threw his hands up. And he pointed out that after the yellow signs went up that says we're going to change something, which is what the applicant is planning on doing, that's when they went back and looked and they changed back to this is an RT, not an R1. So it wasn't the city just suddenly, oh, what the hell, let's change this. There was a reason. The public came forward with information. You have to do your due diligence. They didn't go back far enough and look at enough things. And it's being pointed out. So, anyways, I'm sorry. I got a little upset. Thank you.
Mayor Weiss, Deputy Mayor Feller, members of the City Council. My name is Joel West. I live at 1730 South Pacific Street. The third person testifying read a letter of support for the applicant from a resident of 1735 South Pacific. However, I live across the street from 1735 South Pacific, and it has been owned since July 2013 by the applicant. So it is not by a current resident, because there are no long-term residents there. The staff determined this property has been R1 at least since 1986, according to the certified coastal map, the only thing recognized and approved by the Coastal Commission. The applicant must understand the importance of the Coastal Commission because he owns and manages more than 24 properties in the coastal zone in Oceanside, on Pacific Street and on the Strand, and has done many redevelopment efforts on these properties that were subject to coastal approval. The applicant knows that the GIS map is not legally binding, as it says on the GIS map, as noted earlier, as in other cities. Reasonable effort has been made to assure the accuracy, but some information may not be accurate, and the city assumes no liability for the use of this information. At least two speakers have mentioned SB 330, prohibiting downzoning, but the staff is not proposing downzoning, but instead an interpretation that since 1986 this has been an R1 property. That would not be downzoning. Instead, I suggest that the city is being asked to bail out an investor for a bad business decision. This 8-bedroom property is this company's third large short-term rental in a single block from Whaley to Cassidy Street. It turns out there isn't enough demand to support 3 8 to 10 bedroom rentals in this neighborhood, and so now the owner is looking to change its business strategy. The 1643 property was used for large events with many complaints until the city's new STR ordinance limited all STRs to a specific number of nighttime guests and no more than 10 daytime visitors. If this project is redeveloped as a duplex, it would be entitled to 20 daytime visitors, but with the requested zoning change, it would be allowed 30 daytime visitors here at this address. So this is not about a business issue. This is a business issue and not a legal issue. And we ask that you uphold the lawful decision of the staff and the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Carolyn Wilt.
I'm Carolyn Wilt, and I live at 1719 South Pacific Street, and I thank you very much for allowing me to speak today. I have known the people...
Could you speak in the mic?
Oh, I'm
mic,
sorry.
ma'am? Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I've known the people who have lived at 1643 for the last 35 years. It has always been a residential one area as long as I've known it. The walkway to the beach, which was built by the city, was meant to divide the R1 district from the residential tourist area. Unfortunately, some worker at the city told Mr. Fishbeck that the home was RT. That, as we know now, was a mistake. Please don't let Mr. Fishbeck make more money like he makes on all his many 10-bedroom hotels, which in the summer he charges $10,000 a week, which is very profitable for him. The resolution that we came up with recently to go over the STRs said that there would be no new STRs in a residential area. So I think he needs to sell this property. Please allow 1643 to remain residential one. Thank you very much.
Are there any other public? Seeing none, then we will go to Mr. Dillon. You have time remaining.
So each one has time remaining?
Thank you. Mark Dillon again on behalf of the appellant. Couple of rebuttal points. First, council mentioned beach or public access, and the best rebuttal I can provide is found in your January 22, 2020 staff report, page 5, where where it says, quote, planning staff recognizes public access, and then it goes on to say, but did not consider this when reviewing the zoning map because it is speculative. Secondarily, we've never made any claim or argument about when these stairs went in. I don't care when they went in. And it's not pertinent to any argument I'm making. Third, as to beach public access, council made the suggestion that was our main argument. It wasn't our argument at all. It was advanced by the opposition. I made and summarized our four arguments when I was up here last. Second point, council referenced the GIS mapping and suggested or inferred that that was our only argument. Again, I'll let the record speak for itself. That wasn't our only argument. The GIS mapping is an important public tool. It was relied on. That's the importance of that point. Third rebuttal point, this is not about the owner. It's not about the applicant. It's not about its representatives. It's not about short-term vacation rentals. The city already has an adopted set of regulations that are governing short-term vacation rentals. It's in effect, it's operating, it's effective. It's also not about code issues. It's not about whether you're making money or not making money, wealthy or not wealthy. It's about this. It's about reconciling the zoning with your city's general plan and local coastal plan and avoiding violating your general plan land use designations, your local coastal plan designations, and SB 330. That's what it's about. The interpretation ought to be an effort to reconcile, not to generate an irreconcilable conflict. That ought to be the mission of your city staff, to interpret your zoning consistent with your local coastal program, consistent with your general plan. Thank you for hearing me out. Appreciate it, and would ask council to have the property be kept in the RT zone. Thank you.
And with that, we will close the public input portion of the hearing and come back to council. And what I'd like to start off with saying, and I appreciate everyone taking the time, both from the public and Mr. Stenzer, and the effort you put in the historical information. I think it's indisputable that the zoning maps, not just the current but the prior maps, clearly show the property in the R1 zone. But I also recognize that the land use map should determine the zoning designation, and the zoning map should be consistent with the land use map. And in this case, it does not. So I'm going to make a motion that we uphold the city planner's zoning determination, but include in that motion direction to staff to develop an appropriate remedy to reconcile the zoning and general plan conflict. Councilmember Sanchez?
I don't understand the second part of your motion.
That we direct staff to develop an appropriate remedy to reconcile the general plan and zoning conflict.
What remedy would that be? What are we talking about?
The land use map shows high-density residential, and it's inconsistent with the zoning. So somehow that needs to be remedied.
So in other words, this would remain R1?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I definitely support that. That means that...
I don't second that.
Okay, I'll second the motion. And I'll be brief too. We know, and I served on the Coastal Commission, so I know this personally through 4 years of serving on the Coastal Commission, that public beach access is number one of the highest priorities of the California Coastal Commission. That is not going to go away because of some lack of knowledge by our current staff that it's been there since way back in the day. The reliance on a non-scientific GIS, I mean, we all know, even as lay people, we know you cannot rely on GIS. You cannot. The disclaimer is very clear, especially for someone that is knowledgeable in matters of development, land use development. It's absolute. So we're not down zoning. This has been zoned from day one as R1. Has always been R1. Zone map, the certified zone map was certified by the Coastal Commission since 1986. And again, the public access is definitely something that will be maintained. I mean, that is the highest priority. So I support staff's recommendation and staff's determination, and thank you.
Councilmember Klein.
I also spending quite a bit of time on this issue. I think I have to agree with Mr. Dillon on the point that it's not about the applicant, it's about the issue, and this is very simple of where that line is. And after sitting and talking with staff at length, I think there's no compelling reason to overturn their determination. I'm pretty confident with that decision. I am going to support that decision, but I also think there is inconsistencies that were very clear that we need to find the appropriate remedy.
Councilmember Rodriguez?
Did you want to clarify something first? Yeah, go ahead. I'm yielding to Deputy Mayor.
So I had my speaker button on earlier, and clearly it says in here that we can ask staff to reconcile that. It says they'd be amenable to reconciling, and that's what I initially thought that Peter said, but then I think I heard something else at the mayor. So what the mayor said, I thought I heard something different, and I didn't. So that's my comment on that. I do want to say public access here has no play in this for me. I think that clearly the property was prior to anything that Beachfront Only, or whatever the LLC is for this, was involved in, was it was through staff's interaction. And I'm not, everybody makes mistakes and they have to suffer their consequences, and I'm not saying that didn't happen here, but I think if I hope we are going to reconcile, because this can't happen and have this kind of reaction after the fact, which is that I believe he already thought this was RT. You got, what is it, R3 across the street, in other blocks. I agree, a block doesn't make a zone, but I also think that as I looked at it, that it easily could be on the north side of that street too, or the south side of Whaley, and then part of this would be in the project. So those are my comments. I'm going to support the mayor's.
Thank you. I have one question for staff. I understand, at least on the sign on the building, there's an application on file. I'm presuming that application that's on file does not impact or remove the public access stairs.
Honorable Mayor, City Council, no, it does not.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Rodriguez?
Okay, yeah, correct. This has nothing to do with public access. No one's taking public access. No one wants to obstruct public access. This is specifically referencing a determination. I'm going to agree with the mayor's motion. There's definitely some confusion, and it's a unique situation. We're dealing with one property, and so as a part of that reconciliation, I am hopeful that the outcome would match the high-density residential being the highest and best use of that property as we move this forward. Thank you.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Right. No, I just wanted to clarify. The motion is to adopt the resolution upholding Planning Commission resolution, which is adopting the city planner's determination, and all the added language to the motion is to make that consistent, the language consistent. Is that correct?
The included in the motion is direction to staff to develop an appropriate remedy to reconcile the zoning and general plan conflict,
which will result in the property remaining as R1. Is that right?
Depends on how they come up with the remedy. I'm going to rely on them.
No, I don't understand the motion then, because the land has never changed. It's always been R1. So if that's not what the motion is, then I can't support it. I can't make the second. I'm not sure what a remedy. You can't remedy a change in zoning.
If I could jump in, I think with the mayor, the direction as the second part of that motion is for staff to come up with a fix between the inconsistency between the general plan and the land use. The general plan land use designation and the zoning, but the effect of this decision will be to affirm the city planner's determination. Any future action would have to go through an appropriate process. Public hearings, notice, application. One option could be the applicant decides he wants to amend his current application to seek a rezone now that it's been determined, should this motion be approved, that the R1 zoning applies to the property. It's his right to pursue a rezone along with the other elements of his application. That would have to go through a public process, but that's not being decided now.
Okay, so if I can ask staff, does staff interpret that this is going to be, that we're upholding the R1 designation? Is that correct?
Yeah,
is that what you're hearing?
Yes, if I understand the motion correctly, it's affirming the city planner's decision, which was that this property is zoned R1. And I also understand the second part of that motion, which is staff needs to go back and address the inconsistency that currently exists between zoning and general plan, and was mentioned by the city attorney. That process will involve a public hearing both before the Planning Commission and City Council to fix that.
When you say fix it, you mean that it would remain R1.
Well,
is that correct?
Either the general plan or zoning or both need to get fixed in order to bring consistency between those two documents. Right now, they're inconsistent, right? The zoning and the general plan do not match regardless of which way we went on this application, because zoning is R1 and the general plan split is either high-density residential or low-density. The issue is, the primary issue is that although there are RT-zone properties on that block, including the ones just to the north, the general plan doesn't reflect that RT zoning designation.
Right, but what I read in the staff report is that it's very clearly, it's never been changed to R1.
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct. So the effect of this action isn't going to change the zoning on that property.
Okay, so I would like the record to reflect that my second is to only the first part and not to the second part, because I don't really understand the second part.
You can't.
Marco is saying it's okay.
Councilmember Keim?
So I'm going to support the mayor's motion to support staff's recommendation today. And as Mr. Gonzalez said, we're not determining what the future, how that remedy will be for those on the dais right now. We're just directing staff to come up with a remedy. And so I'm not making a determination or a preference of what zoning that will be. I just want staff to come with.
I guess I don't like the word remedy because it sounds like, you're going into not black letter law, but
I'm just going to say she withdrew her second. Here's where I'm at. I see that there's confusion, there's not consistencies. I think
Confused.
part of this property is an RT, and I think that it should be RT. That's my opinion, but I'm willing to compromise and allow our staff and agree that right now it's R1, we'll go with that, but in the future it needs to be reconciled, and I would like it to see it reconciled as RT. But
you're not
that's
deciding.
going to be up to staff in the public process, and it's going to come back before a vote.
So I had made a motion, and effectively Councilmember Sanchez has withdrawn her second because it was all one motion. So if there's a...
I second.
no, I'm hearing that the neighbors are fine with this, and so I'll keep my second.
So we have a motion and a second, please
I've
vote.
got very good ears. Thank you. Hearing, I should say. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second, please vote.
Councilmember.
Motion approved, 5-0.
With that, we'll go to item 19, which is a request by Deputy Mayor Feller and Councilmember Rodriguez to discuss amendments to the city's inclusionary housing ordinance.
I know, right? So I'm going to make this really quick. I'm really passionate. Me and Deputy Mayor Jack Feller are pretty passionate about both these items, but I think this is probably one of the most important council agenda items that will come before us to give staff direction to bring back things. So there's no decisions being made tonight, but I do think it's appropriate, just for public record, that as we move forward as a city to attempt to create more government subsidized affordable housing, that we do it with a vision, we do it with a plan, and we do it with a complete understanding that the model that we have before us and what the state is putting on us is not working. And we need to be able to, as policymakers, get creative. And so, fact, affordable housing is a term used to define eligibility for government subsidized housing. Tax dollars are leveraged to cover the difference between 30% of an individual's income up to the fair market rent in the form of a voucher or other program. And if you make 80% of the area median income, you can qualify. There's an approval process, and your income is regularly checked to make sure you still are approved. Here's a chart of the San Diego County median income and what's designated as extremely low, very low, or low income to qualify. Oceanside affordable housing policy is not working for working families. In the last 10 years, only 354 affordable housing units have been created in our city. In 2013, there was some changes that were made to the inclusionary zoning ordinance. I reference it here as affordable housing policy that gives the development community, when they build in our city more than 3 units, a few options to move forward on. Number one is they can build 10% on-site of affordable units to 10% of the number of units. Option 2 is they can build them off-site. Option 3 is an in-lieu fee, which recently went up for the development community, and that was the fee we were talking about for the pre-approval process. And there's a consistent complaint from the community that why are these developers always paying an in-lieu fee? We need to create affordable housing. Well, a lot of it has to do with the way our policies are written. When a developer moves to build a development, they have to secure private funding, they have to secure conventional funding, and those lenders want to see consistency. They want to see a definitive number, and the easiest pathway we've given them right now is the in-lieu fee. It just makes the most sense. It makes the most business sense, and I want to be able to change that so we can have the development community do what they do best, and that's build affordable housing. We must understand what this word regional housing needs assessment is, so I'm going to give a quick 101 just in case you don't know. But it's kind of what the state puts on us, and it's a pretty ridiculous process. But it does 2 things. Number one, a city is required to zone for enough new housing to accommodate future population growth. And number 2, zone for income restricted subsidized affordable housing. So the key word here is they only have to zone for it. There is no mandate that we have to build affordable. There's no mandate that we have to build, because cities don't build. Developers build. We just have to create the zoning for them to build. RHNA numbers are not true housing needs. They are the result of political process in which affluent cities lobby to keep their numbers low. For example, Beverly Hills, the last RHNA cycle, they lobbied and they only have to build 3 affordable housing units. How convenient. Well, they have that lobbying and political ability to be able to do that. The regional housing need process asks cities to plan for more than 10 times the amount of subsidized housing that can be funded. We'll go into that in a second. RHNA bases housing needs and projections on population rather than prices. As a result, it steers housing production away from places where housing is most expensive and new development most necessary. And it ends up pitting market rate development against the affordable development, which we can't do that. Both of them are necessary to advance affordability. Real quick, it has 3 stages. It starts on a state level. The Department of Finance and the Regional Council of Governments comes up with a number based on projected population growth. They assign it to each region. SANDAG in our region will get that report, and then they will begin to negotiate and lobby, and Deputy Mayor Jack Feller was dealing with that up there, and it really gets political on who gets what, when, where, how, and then they assign these numbers to each city based on income levels, number of units, and so on and so forth. And then lastly, it comes onto a city to build a certain number of affordable and regular price housings that we never meet. We are so far below the numbers. Matter of fact, the entire state, only 23 jurisdictions actually met the numbers that were put on them. The remainder of the state does not meet these needs. It's a number that's unattainable. and we'll finalize that here in a second. This process is problematic for two reasons. First big one is the fifth RENA cycle from 2013 to 2021 estimated that California would need over 665 income restricted units. So the state goes, hey, based on population, we need to build 665 income restricted units. That's about 80,000 affordable units per year. A report from the Legislative Analyst's Office noted that low-income housing tax credit, which is where developers apply for the funding to get tax credits on almost 100% of these projects, it's the primary subsidy. In California, they've never lent more than 7,000 loans. So the state says they want 80,000 a year built, but there's not enough money to ever build that. It's this unrealistic, problematic, will never happen. And unfortunately, jurisdictions like ours are trying to do what the state asks us. Meanwhile, we're crippled and we're not doing what we're supposed to do to help our low-income families here in Oceanside.
I'm sorry, point of order. How many more minutes left from the 10 minutes?
It's a presentation. It's a presentation, so it's not
actually,
time.
it's a
the presentation
limit is 10 minutes, isn't it?
I believe
you might learn something.
Council has
member.
10 minutes to make general council comments.
I mean, I understand what you're saying basically, but some of that, what you're saying is that not exactly correct. So you're talking really fast, and this is your spin on stuff, right? So I wish you would just get to the point so that then we could have some discussion, because you're giving like a class, and I have a different interpretation of what we have been doing and what the law states. And since I'm a lawyer, I have a little more experience in that. But if you could get to the point so that we can have some decent debate.
Okay. Are you done, council member?
Yes.
Thank you. So the second read problem is RENA only requires that cities demonstrate in their plans that they have space that can potentially hold the needed income restricted housing. Nothing in the law ensures that any income restricted housing will actually be built, nor that these potential sites of income restricted housing must actually be reserved for that purpose. By framing housing needs in terms of population and household growth rather than prices in existing market, RENA steers policymakers away from the logically obvious but politically inconvenient point that housing production should be concentrated in place where housing is most expensive. Low-income housing tax credit is an economically inefficient method for producing rental housing. The process of allocating and awarding tax credits is really time-consuming and complex. It took several years for us to do the Mission Cove project. The city built up this big pile of in lieu fees, way overpaid for a property lot, way overpaid for the entitlement pathway, and then we went through this process that took years, and after $90 million spent, we got 285 units, and I think it took 14 years. And so if we're going to go on this pathway of every 10 to 14 years we create units, we're going to get nowhere, and the numbers speak for themselves. Just some other facts I'll leave up there for you to read for later if you want to re-reference this video online. LIHTC is vulnerable to market forces as well. There's a lot coming against the low-income housing tax credit as the method of funding affordable housing units. There's so many parties involved. It's very complex, and this is an example of the complexities involved in an affordable housing tax credit unit creation. It's just super convoluted, inconsistent, and the recent 2018 Omnibus Appropriations Act made permanent changes to household income eligibility, so now you can make more money and still qualify. So it really pushes down the really low income families from being able to qualify, our seniors. And the Tax Cut and Jobs Act likely affected investors' demand for the tax credit. So we have federal legislation that's given more incentives to investors. Why would they want to do a project like this and build when they can take advantage of other legislative investments? So there's a lot of environmental obsolescence that are affecting this, which is a reason why as a city, we as policymakers, we really have to be smart about how we plan the future of our city. Policy objectives must not be framed around meeting RENA housing targets. It will never work. A simple look at the price of Oceanside market rate housing should tell us that the city needs much more of it. Similarly, the fact that Oceanside has zoned relatively few places as suitable for low-income housing should not tell us that those places must be protected at all costs. It should tell us that Oceanside needs to just change its zoning. Right now, we are in the process of changing our general plan, but according to staff, when we're looking at creating nodes near transportation for affordable housing, we're about 3 years away from actually having that implemented after we go through the whole process. So we have developers that would like to build affordable units, but there's nowhere to build them. Everything is convoluted, and it makes it that much more difficult to get done. There we go. I'm almost done. So we have to have a paradigm shift in how we approach affordable housing, and that comes to the point I come before you today. We have to have we must focus more on housing affordability on a local level. And Oceanside Affordable House Policy must focus on following key principles in order to successfully improve housing affordability, make policy changes that allow more flexibility, predictability, and incentivize to encourage the development community to actually build the affordable units. If a city managed an in lieu fee, you see our method of building affordable units and how long it takes. If we give the roadmap to the development community, who is ultimately responsible in the end for building these units, and we say, here's your rules, here's what we want you to build, what we want you to build, make it happen, they're going to do what they do best because they want to get paid, right? They're going to build the units so they can get their paycheck and build the other units and make it happen. So we have to create that environment for the development community. We have to modify our inclusionary zoning ordinance to be less restrictive and more practical, better planning efforts that identifies and appropriately zones affordable housing nodes near public transit, making it easier for the development community to build off-site affordable units. Currently, Oceanside's 34-year outdated general plan is poorly zoned for this. Imagine if we talk to the North County Transit District next to these Sprinter stations and say, hey, let's get a developer to come out and build a parking structure and build condo units above it, and then we can have developers, when they're doing their developments, they can add in to build those units right there, right near transit. That's what we need to create so we can get a lot more units built here in Oceanside. So I'm done. Want to give a little history with that to kind of justify why we brought this forward, and I would like to hear from my other colleagues.
Do we have public on this?
We have one speaker on this item. I believe it's John Seymour, if you're still here in the audience.
He's at the bar.
And Mr. Seymour is not here.
The only light, Deputy Mayor Feller.
Thank you. The county of San Diego, the RHNA, RHNA numbers is 171,000. The city of Oceanside's number is 5,443, and we've never even come close in the past on these numbers. It's generally understood in the community, in the county community that I have been dealing with, that nobody ever meets their numbers. Even San Diego, who's building a lot of, they took 108,000, I think, of the 171,000 that the county is due. We're just asking to go forward for the benefit of those that will need housing, and other than getting all our money from in lieu fees, we are giving builders an opportunity to build actually a project themselves, or be part of building a project, such as these transit center that Councilmember Rodriguez was just speaking of. So do we have to direct staff or make a motion?
Make a motion.
To go forward? So I'll make a motion that we move forward with this, give it to staff and see what they come back with in 90 days.
What is this? Can you describe it, please? What is the motion? What is the direction to staff specifically?
Direction to staff is to come back to us with a general outline, which is in your
the backup
agenda
material
package.
So what you're saying is we're going to get rid of the 55-year requirement that affordable housing stay as affordable housing that we build, that is built, stay affordable housing for 55 years. You want to get rid of that.
You can't get rid of it.
Okay, there's lines through there, so that's what I'm seeing. There are lines through that requirement.
Our request is to discuss creation of a down payment. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one.
No, that's...
To discuss amendments to the city's inclusionary housing ordinance. Why am I reading this to you?
Not okay with
I'm trying to figure out what the motion is before us.
To facilitate and encourage more applicants to construct on and off-site reserve units and direction to staff to prepare.
So your direction to staff is to think of other ways of getting to affordable housing, and there's no real specific things that they're looking at. This is something that they will look at and possibly recommend to the council. Is that what it is?
That's what it is.
Yeah, and this is just suggestions. We had several meetings with the development community, one of which with staff. And the items you're talking about being crossed out is talking about affordable for sale units, which restricts the sales price, and then the new buyer has to be on a restricted sale price, and it ends up being a glorified rental property instead of an actual ownership. And San Marcos failed at this program, so it's just, yeah, staff's going to come back with ideas.
Did I have the floor? I thought I did.
Yes.
I did, but the answer still very vague. But I will ask, are you asking also that ADUs be required to be affordable housing? Is that part of the suggestions?
Yes, it is a part of the suggestions for staff.
I couldn't support that. Not every ADU is going to be affordable. I mean,
no,
people
it's a
are
new
making,
development, Esther.
I'm sorry?
For new developments.
Well, I don't think we're at a point where we're trying to resolve what the answer is. The issue, what I'm seeing is this is giving direction to staff to come back with a program to expand the affordability and housing affordability.
Well, I know that staff is constantly looking at that, so I'm fine with direction to have them do what they've been doing. But I will not support having every single ADU that's built from here on end be an affordable housing project. That is not what we have as current law, and I think you would have a lot of people come down very upset about that.
Yeah, that's not what we're saying, Esther.
Okay, because that's what number 2 says.
It's a suggestion. So just to clarify, Jack, your motion was item 19, request by Deputy Mayor Feller and Councilmember Rodriguez to discuss amendments. Oh, okay, number 2, give instruction to the city staff to examine the inclusionary housing ordinance, chapter 14C, to facilitate and encourage more applicants to construct on or off-site reserve units, and to come back within 90 days with some of those potential improvements or changes that would stimulate more affordable housing being created.
Councilmember Keim.
I'd like to support more affordable housing, but I want to ask a couple questions of staff on just how we're going to implement this agenda item. How do you see this working? If Mr. Borrego, could you just, or Ms. Hannafin or Crooks, just a quick, I just want to see how you see this this process playing out real quick, so I can get a little more clarity.
Honorable Mayor and council members, I really do see this, and the reason I called Angie Hannafin up here was because it really is a collaborative process, I think, between development services and housing, because what's being described here really touches both departments. Certainly, I think we're all in agreement that there are things that can be done to our inclusionary housing provisions to improve their effectiveness. It is a constantly evolving field, and so I think it makes a lot of sense to take a fresh look at our requirements and update them in order to spur more affordable housing. To Councilmember Rodriguez's point, Housing element law continues to evolve as well, and cities are going to be held more accountable, and they have been each legislative session in order to actually deliver the units as well. We're not required to build them, but certainly there's pressure for cities to do a better job of meeting their targets. So I think it really is an opportune time to revisit that. And I think that we have enough guidance based on the discussion and some discussions that we've had internally already to start in the right direction. So I think we're pretty clear on things in terms of ideas that we can look at and bring forward recommendations in accordance with what was requested.
I think that provides a little more detail. I'm more comfortable on broad guidance than I think you see some of the information in front of us is very technical, and I'd actually like to spend more time talking with staff and figuring out what we can do. We can always make improvements in affordable housing. That's going to continue to be a challenge, but I'm much more comfortable if this is just broad direction right now instead of actually coming back with amendments to the city code. So I'm not prepared to do that, but I'm prepared to partner with.
I think we see it as a collaborative process, of course, with our affordable housing developers as well in the development community, because obviously we need their feedback, because at the end of the day, we want to have a program that results in meaningful change.
Okay. So if there's a motion just to direct staff to come back with broad.
That's what it is.
We made the motion.
Councilmember Sanchez?
Thank you. And some of the things that I'd like to see is, the infill. I think a lot of times what we need to do is acquire property, and this is something that we can do as a city, is acquire property and say, okay, we want to see an affordable housing project here and put it out there. I mean, that is how that is the best use of the in lieu fees, especially. We already have, and then when we do these projects, we obviously rely on the what do they call the vouchers, on the vouchers, because you can't do a project unless you have the vouchers, just like the one that we just did over here, just near the bridge. And I think making it close to transportation lines, making sure that that it's near services, near bus routes, existing bus routes, near the transit center. I know that there's going to be some opportunities there, which will have to go through the city process, as I understand it. And we actually are going to have one staff person that is part of picking who the developer is going to be. Is that correct? Yeah. So I think those are the kind of things that we need to move, like what we talk about, having black and white kind of rules to make it easier, bright lines, to make it easier for developers to say, okay, this is where I can do this. I mean, I'm all for that. But what we need to do is the infill and ensuring that it's in places where it's close to everything, and not somewhere out east where we continue to lose bus routes. We're hoping that people will actually use public lines of transportation, pedestrian, whatever. So those are the kind of things that I'm most interested in. Not interested in trying to change our ADUs or take out the 55-year requirement that affordable housing remain 55 years and things of that nature. I understand that there's some frustration. I know some of our housing specialists, affordable housing specialists, also get frustrated with the credits. But the good thing is that we've had a lot of success within our city in building, say, the Mission Cove and La Mission and some others. In the last 20 years, it's been over 1,000 units, rehabbing included. So looking at rehabbing, that would be acquiring property. That would probably be the easiest and quickest way to have affordable housing available. So those are the kind of things that I'd like to see in being creative. Thank you.
I would just like to say that anything we can do to encourage more applicants to construct the units versus paying the in lieu fee to provide actual affordable units, and even if it's on site, to me, if they're building 2,500 square foot units, the affordable units don't need to be that. So I think there are ways of expanding the program to make the affordability, if you will, more attainable. Deputy Mayor Feller?
I just wanted to comment that's just exactly what Villa Astoria did.
We have a motion and a second. Please vote.
Motion approved, 5-0.
And with that, we will adjourn to 3:30.
Can I make a quick statement here? I wanted also to congratulate staff who's still here on getting the another award through the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The city got a $72,000 award to pay the salary of a family self-sufficiency coordinator in the Neighborhood Services Department for calendar year 2020. So again, thank you for what you're doing. I know you're out there grabbing opportunities and helping us to get our residents into housing and into shelter. Thank you.
With that, we'll adjourn to 3:30 Wednesday, February 5th.